was just looking around for a gavel to hit the table with. Good morning to you all, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this morning's meeting of the Audit and Accounts Committee. As you're all aware, the County Council does allow filming and photography at its public meetings, so please feel free to take pictures and use social media during the meeting. Please do make sure that your phone is set to silent or vibrate whilst the meeting is taking place. This meeting is being live streamed and a recording will be available to view later on the Council's website. There's no fire alarm tests scheduled for today, so if the alarm sounds, I'll quickly adjourn the meeting and we'll leave by the side doors and use the external staircase to assemble in the car park. Agenda item 1 is apologies for absence and declarations of interest. Would the Democratic Services Officer report any apologies, please?
Thank you, Chair. Apologies from Councillor Poulton, who is substituted by Councillor Bradnam.
Thank you very much indeed. Does any member wish to declare any disclosable pecuniary interest or non-statutory disclosable interest, please, on any item which comes up today? It is not impossible that the subject of FACT, Fenland Area Community Transport, may come up today, and if it does, I'll declare now that I am a trustee of FACT, so I'll carefully play no part in the meeting if that subject does come up. Right, we can move on to agenda item 2, which is the minutes of the meeting, which was held on the 28th of November 2025, and the minutes action log. First of all, the committee is being asked to approve the minutes of the meeting as an accurate record. Are there any objections? And this is just about the accuracy of the minutes. Any objections at all? Anna.
Since I wasn't at that meeting, I would abstain from. Since I wasn't at that meeting, I'll abstain.
Yeah, I appreciate you weren't at the meeting, yes. So no objections. I will take that as being approved then. Regina, do I need a formal proposal and seconder? Excellent, thank you. I'll sign the minutes at the end of the meeting. Do members have any questions or comments on the minutes action log, please? No. Good, we'll take the minutes action log as noted then. Agenda item 3 is petitions and public questions. One public question was received this month, but unfortunately the speaker is unable to attend the meeting, so a written response will be provided and that will be circulated to all members of the committee. So we can move on to agenda item 4. We're making very good progress here. And agenda item 4 is the Cambridgeshire County Council Statement of Accounts for 2024-25 and the Audit Results Report. Stephen Howarth, the Head of Finance, will introduce the Officer Report and we'll then hear from Sarah Brown, who is from our external auditor, KPMG. Stephen.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, everyone. This report presents the final statement of accounts for the financial year 2024-25. The statement of accounts is the comprehensive overview of the Council's financial position, income and expenditure and activities for that year. The accounts include the pension fund accounts as well, I should say at this stage. They've been reviewed by the Pensions Committee and I think potentially by this committee as well. But we have got colleagues on hand to answer any questions, but I'll, as they've been reviewed, I'll keep my introduction on the main council statement of accounts. The draft accounts for that year were first presented to this committee in July last year, following the on-time publication at the end of June. And since then, they've been subject to external audit by KPMG and are now presented in their final form ahead of them being signed, hopefully by the end of the month. As well as the accounts, the report is accompanied by an adjustment log setting out differences or errors that have been identified since publication and how they've been dealt with, and the external auditor's annual report and year-end reports as well. The committee will recall when we last updated on progress in November that much of the work by that point had been done and an interim adjustments log was presented, but several areas of the audit were still in progress. That included the accounting treatment of transactions with this land limited, the implementation of the new IFRS 16 leases accounting standard, and detailed work on the PFI models. And that work's now broadly concluded or is drawn to a close, and any final adjustments are reflected in the papers before you. Despite the continued national pressures on local authority audits, including the fact that here 2022-23 financial year was not audited and the following year received a disclaimed opinion following an abridged audit, this year's audit has been substantially more complete, with I think nearly all areas reviewed in detail as set out in the auditor's reports as well. And as this report explains, while we expect the opinion for 24-25 will still be disclaimed, this will hopefully be on an improved basis, reflecting increased assurance that KPMG have managed to get in the first step in building up assurance to a fully unmodified opinion in a later year. So through this report, we ask that the Chair is authorised to sign the final statement of accounts and that committee endorses the treatment of audit differences identified through that audit process. So committee will again recall from previous updates and set out in the paper that the council has an approach of always adjusting for audit differences unless they meet one of a fairly narrow set of criteria which are set out in the report. And committee will Appendix 1 sets out all of the audit differences identified and those treatment and the treatment of them. And committee will see that in a large majority of cases the differences have been adjusted for, in particular where those are things like lease accounting with the implementation for the first time of IFRS 16. Where there are net nil adjustments and where there are offsetting corrections and updates to disclosure notes as well, and also some administrative corrections. 5 non-material adjustments are set out in the appendix that have not been adjusted for, with reasons for that set out in the appendix and in some cases in the paper as well. So where these relate to asset valuations, while closer than last year, there remains a difference in judgment between the council's valuers and the external auditor. One item relating to school cash balances, which is not adjusted for, is the exact accounting entries at this stage aren't known. And then there are 2 final items relating to accounting for the long-term debtor with this land and company refinancing in 2024-25. So firstly, KPMG flagged the difference in valuation of the debtor between the historic cost basis used in the accounts and the amortized cost basis, which takes interest cash flow into account as well, which is required under the accounting regulations. That departure from the code in this case was thought justified mainly for the sake of clarity and was set out to committee at length in a previous update. There's then an identified difference flagged by KPMG in specific accounting treatment of the refinancing transaction, notwithstanding the agreement, I think, on the fundamentals of treating the conversion as a capital grant. In this case, following detailed consideration by the council and external advice, there remains a disagreement in one particular aspect of that treatment set out in our paper and in the auditor's report as well. And so in the final accounts before you, the council's original treatment remains, and that's set out particularly, I would say, in 2.1.10 and 11 on page 28 of your pack. It's important to flag that's not a material difference that raised by KPMG as it relates to particularly related narrative disclosures in the accounts have been updated substantially to enhance clarity, and that difference of treatment relates really just to classification between 2 lines of the comprehensive income and expenditure statement, with the bottom line of that position remaining unchanged. And then I'll also say the council's treatment of expected credit loss for the remaining debtor, I think, has been accepted, which is that there is no material risk remaining as of 31st of March 2025, though KPMG do flag there may have been at the end of the prior year, but that's not quantified. Just to summarise the rest of it briefly, Chair, the report from KPMG also sets out the value for money work that's been done, with one recommendation flagged around oversight of the SEND deficit, which I think has been discussed previously as well, and progress is seen against areas flagged in the previous year. The report also flags to committee that the council will need to sign a letter of representation alongside the accounts to the auditor at the end of the process, which is an important formal document setting out that we've provided all requested information, that the accounts have been prepared on the necessary statutory basis, and that we are not aware of any undisclosed issues. And then finally, the report also gives some information about future year publication deadlines with backstop dates, which will continue to be sort of challenging, I think, in the process, and some progress around objections to the accounts, but I won't add anything more to that, though. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed, Stephen. As these final audited accounts of which are before us also include the final audited accounts of the Cambridgeshire Pension Fund, we also have Fiona Coates available to us from the Pension Fund team, who's on Zoom and will be available to answer any questions. So we will move to open the report for questions and comments from any members. I intend to give everyone every opportunity to ask questions and supplementaries on anything within these reports. It is particularly important that members of the committee are able fully to question and challenge what we have within these reports. And I will make sure that everyone gets their opportunity to do so, but I would ask that we just deal with one specific point at a time. And then any other members who might have any comments to make on that particular point can also do so. But everyone will get the opportunity for every question and supplementary that they wish to ask. And my patience, whilst not unlimited, is pretty close to being unlimited on this because it is so important. Right, so we'll move to any questions or comments from any members, please. Ricky, would you care to start?
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to start with the audit opinion and rebuilding assurance. So what I'd like to know is what's our practical plan, if we have one, by date, and when do we plan to return to the non-disclaimed audit opinion? Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. And that's a question which is being asked in audit committees right around the country. And I think it might be appropriate for Sarah to give an opinion about that if she can. Sarah.
Thank you. So there are in the report, which I'll perhaps move on to after we've taken other questions. There is some detail around the process for build back assurance. What I would say is that, what I would say is that this year we've been very focused on concluding as much of the audit work as possible with regard to the 24-25 financial statements, and we have made very good progress, particularly with regard to the balances on the balance sheet. So you'll perhaps note in the report that we've submitted to this committee in terms of the key areas of the balance sheet, notably land and buildings, investment property, debtors, creditors, pensions. We've got comfortable with the closing balances in the majority of cases. Perhaps the key exception to that is valuation of land and buildings, PPE, which is largely schools. And because of the fact that that's on a cyclical valuation basis, so they're valued once every 5 years, it makes it a little bit more difficult to catch up with full assurance in that area and be comfortable with the valuation movements that have gone through reserves. Having said that, we're just going through an internal process within KPMG and through discussion with the National Audit Office and SITFA around what the most appropriate approach to that might be, whether that's encouraging councils to accelerate the valuation of those types of properties, or indeed whether we can become comfortable through some form of indexation approach. So with regard to the balance sheet, we're comfortable actually with the majority, which will put us in a really good place for building back assurance over the next 12 months. PPE is an area that's being discussed across the sector. Then if we move to the income and expenditure account, again, we've made really good progress in terms of being comfortable with a lot of the movements that have gone through the accounts during the financial year we've audited. Having said that, because there's been a number of years of disclaimer, it will be a requirement for us to go back and understand how much work that we actually need to do in each financial year that's had a disclaimed opinion for us to be comfortable with the reserves position. We have issued to management a build back assurance risk assessment. Once we have all of the information back, we'll be able to conduct a much more detailed risk assessment, which will give us a view as to the timetable where we'll be able to move back to non-disclaimed opinions. It's difficult, therefore, at this point to give a date by which we'll move away. But I think what I would say is there is definitely a plan in place this year for us to not only focus on the 25-26 financial statements, but to undertake as much build back work as we are able. And what I would suggest is that perhaps once we've had a response to all of the information to enable us to do that risk assessment, we can bring back to a subsequent audit committee a more detailed timetable agreed with management.
Thank you for that, Sarah. You didn't quite answer the question which Ricky asked, and I just wonder if you can tell us if, given the position of the balances at the year end of 24-5, or the likely position on those, whether it is even theoretically possible in your view that the 25-6 financial statements may not be subject to a disclaimer.
I think it will be difficult for the disclaimer to go away in its entirety. It may be that we can get to a point that we move away from a disclaimed opinion for the top half of the balance sheet, as in not the reserve. The reserves is the very difficult situation because there are so many years that go back not being subject to audit. So I think it's difficult for me to give a definitive answer at this point when we've not conducted that risk assessment work. But I think just to be open, it's unlikely that we'll move away completely from a disclaimed opinion next year.
That's very helpful, Sarah, and I think that's as open as you possibly can be in the circumstances. Michael.
Chair, if I may just come in on that point, it's not my expectation that we will move away from the disclaimer for the 25-26, I'll be quite frank, nor is it the expectation of my colleagues up and down the country. I think you'll see on page 300 of the pack, KPMG set out there the rebuilding assurance kind of framework over a couple of pages there. What I can say is we have had a number of elements of the work undertaken this year around some of the key aspects that will feed into next year, such as the waste PFI. So we do expect these to be worked through. I received yesterday, the day before, the close down timetable from the finance team. So we're already starting in terms of working on the close down for 25-26. But I think this is a national problem, which if you read some of the reports suggest that disclaimers will probably be with us till 27-28 in some cases, but we would hope to have them removed for 26-27. I think that has to be our aspiration and our goal, but recognising the amount of work that was caused as a result of the backlog and the decision taken by government a number of years ago now leaves us in the position that we're in, and that's what we're fighting against.
It's really helpful, thank you. Ricky, do you have anything further to add about the disclaimed opinions and building back assurance?
Thank you, Chair. I just have one more supplementary on that. So what, as councillors, what local actions are within our control in regards to the disclaimer? Like, are we able to control, staffing, earlier accounts production, asset valuation methodology? I'm struggling here. Methodology. Sorry, I'll leave that. I'm struggling with my voice. Or audit readiness.
Thank you, Michael.
So I think there's two things to say. First of all, whilst the accounts are disclaimed by external audit and have been, there's still a statutory requirement for myself to go through and sign off the statement of accounts. And therefore, every year, including the year where the audit was a very limited approach from our previous auditors, I still went through that process, going through the accounting records and the position with the team so that I could professionally sign off those statement of accounts. So that was me seeking assurance that I then give to councillors and obviously to external audit, and external audit review that. Secondly, we have a strong close down timetable now. We've brought forward some of the higher risk areas such as property, plant and equipment, PPE, evaluations, and worked with KPMG now for a couple of years to gain an understanding of their ask and their need. But we have to reflect that there are a very large and complex set of accounts to go through. Things such as the waste PFI, any PFI up and down the country will be the same, requires more detailed and explicit work to be carried out by the auditors. And therefore, the auditors have a programme of work that they need to work through. And of course, the fee is also within the pack. We need to be mindful in terms of what's feasible going through the entire year when we look at the auditors. Don't just have ourselves as their only client and not just this sector as their only client. That was what was recognised by government. So I think we are doing everything we can, and while of course massive focus for us at the moment is the preparation for local government reorganisation and having these accounts audited with a clean opinion by that date is a clear focus and goal for myself and for the team. So we have put additional resources into the team over the last 12 months, and I'm pleased to say the team has performed brilliant. I would at this point, probably because if I don't, I'll forget about it. But I want to thank the team for all the work that they've done, as well as for external audit. It's not been an easy period of recovery. It's not been an easy set of accounts to close down. There's lots of complexities, as you can see. But that team that we've got is one of the best that I've ever worked with. And, you know, I'm confident that we can work through each of the points as we tick them off with KPMG.
Thank you. And Sarah, do you have any comment to make about what we could do, what's under our control to manage to get back to non-disclaimed opinions as quickly as possible?
I mean, I guess I would agree with what Michael said. You know, obviously, if you had unlimited resource to be able to focus only on production of the financial statements and build back assurance, you may be able to get there a little bit quicker. I think in reality, what we are keen to do is agree a sensible timetable with management to make sure that we can obviously get through the 25-26 financial statements audit, but also do as much build back assurance as we are able. This is partly why we're keen to undertake the risk assessment, because there may be areas that actually we don't necessarily need to do lots and lots of detailed work, that we can undertake sufficient risk assessment to say that we are comfortable, and then therefore move on to focusing on those areas of greater attention. So I think once we've got that timetable in place, we'll obviously agree that with management and bring it to this audit committee. I think on both sides, we're very keen to obviously progress build back as soon as we are able, and therefore we will provide as much resource as we can, obviously subject to that being within a time period that works for us, but also for management.
Thank you very much indeed. Ricky, still on the subject of disclaimed opinions and building back assurance?
Yeah, this is my last supplementary. Thank you, Chair. So listening, I would assume then we have milestones we wish to achieve. So what I'd like to request is if we could get them milestones circulated to our members, so we can see what they are and if there is anything that we can influence. Thank you.
Michael.
Yeah, I've got no problem with that. I'm just looking to Stephen in terms of training for councillors and whether we can cover off in that as we talk to the committee about the 25-26 process.
Yes, just to echo that, but I think it's also, I think Sarah from KPMG mentioned that we would probably hope to bring a bit of a timetable and a plan back to committee on that once it's been worked up with the external auditors. We're very keen to have a timetable with agreed milestones and deliverables to ensure that that progress is not lost on it. Yeah.
Thank you. I do believe it would be really helpful once there is an agreed timetable for that to be circulated to all members of the committee. Anything further, Ricky, on this subject? I'll open it up to other members, but specifically on the disclaimed opinions and building back assurance. Mike, is it about that?
Yes, I think so, and fairly general, because when I see this sort of thing, the first thing that comes into my mind is if only we still had an audit commission. Because, I mean, we had something that worked, and it was abolished in 2014 by the Liberal Democrat Conservative coalition government. And since then, we have had chaos. I believe only 1% of councils actually produced their accounts on time. I mean, that's a 2022-23 stat I've seen. But clearly across the country, people are not producing accounts on time. There is real trouble in getting these accounts agreed, and a significant rise in audit costs as well. You know, the savings that were promised haven't materialised. It's both much more expensive and it's a chaotic system that isn't working. So we've got something across the board. And there's particular things we might want to talk about with Cambridgeshire accounts, but across the board, we have a problem with the system of auditing councils. It's not working. So thanks.
Thank you, Mike. I think it's worth emphasising the problem isn't that councils around the country haven't produced their accounts on time. The problem was, and it was a compounded problem, that there wasn't sufficient audit capacity in the whole of the system to allow those accounts to be audited in time. And that just rolled one year into the next and became a greater problem until we had the major reset, which took place a couple of years ago. Michael, do you want to comment on any of the points that Mike made?
I suppose before I do, Chair, and I know I'm not a voting member of this committee, I have to declare an interest as an ex-Audit Commission employee. So therefore very fondly view the Audit Commission And I remember the day well when Eric Pickles announced the demise. I think we did see at that point in time a drop in fees, but we now see a return to pretty similar rates to what was actually at the time. I think it had an incredible impact on the sector, as has just been described. But we now need to look forward. One of the issues that was faced was being able to attract people into audit roles, and therefore I'm keen that we talk up the role and the important independent role that has been there for centuries of the external auditor and its contribution to public sector life and assurance and building that trust for the public. That was broken as a result of that. I'm hoping what's through the open discussion today and across many councils across the country, we will see that building back, and I hope we'll be able to attract young auditors and auditors of the future, as I once was. And we will see the proposals that are coming forward and the changes that have been introduced nationally embed and strengthen the position. So it was an unfortunate period of time, but I think we're through that now, and I think we should focus now on the future.
Thank you. Mike, do you want to come back at all on that?
No, that's fine. Thanks. Yeah, I accept it's the audit capacity rather than the council itself. Yeah, that's.
Thank you very much indeed. Any other, still on the subject of disclaimed opinions and building back assurance?
Yes, if I may, I wanted to pick up on what Michael was saying about local government reorganisation and how important it is to ensure that we get signed off opinions in time for all that process to be completed. And following up on what Sarah was saying, she seemed to be saying that for the next year, the top half of the accounts we could audit correctly, and the bit about reserves was the difficult bit. But I was naively thinking reserves was actually more straightforward, that Michael, what reserves are for different things, and the auditors can say, yes, that is reasonable or that is not reasonable. So I'm not quite clear whether I've misunderstood this.
Extremely helpful question, Graham. May I ask Sarah, first of all, to explain her comment earlier about the problems on the reserve side?
Yes, so this is driven, and it's not because the council are any different, I should say, from anywhere else within this sector. The issue is that if the income and expenditure account hasn't been audited for a number of years, effectively it's those balances that drive reserves. So the movement in income and expenditure accounts in each period effectively will hit reserves and either go to usable reserves, unusable reserves, within unusable reserves, there may be an earmarked reserves or elsewhere. And so it becomes quite complicated in a local authority set of accounts as to exactly where those income and expenditure movements will go. Now, of course, if those income and expenditure movements haven't been audited in a number of years, it's not possible for us to be able to opine that the reserve position is correct. Now, what we can do, and this is part of the risk assessment that I mentioned earlier, is to say, well, okay, when's the last time there was an unmodified or undisclaimed opinion? What have the income and expenditure movements been through that period? To what extent do we either risk assess them, not away, but that we don't necessarily need to do detailed work? Which of those do we need to actually go back and effectively audit 3 years worth of income and expenditure movements to make sure that what's gone into reserves is appropriate? So I think, just to be clear, this isn't because we have any concerns that the council is putting things in the wrong reserves. It's just simply that reserves are driven by income and expenditure movements, and therefore if we've not audited those income and expenditure movements, we can't say we're comfortable.
Graham, do you care to come back?
No, that's fine. So I'm with Ricky that the quicker we can establish what date we can do all this work by, the better, really. Thank you.
Vicky, is still the same subject?
Yeah, same subject, Chair. I just wanted to touch on the delay, the subject of delays. So in regards to delays, have we now costed the capacity gap or filled that capacity gap versus the cost of sort of weak assurance?
When we're talking about delays, Ricky, we're talking here about delays to get undisclaimed audits, are we?
Sorry, no, I was talking. Apologies, no, sorry, I was talking about the accounts themselves. Sorry, I'm off topic.
Okay, we don't actually have delays on the accounts production at all, but maybe, Michael, you may care to give some detail on that.
Yeah, I mean, Chair, as you just said, we've never had a delay. We've not had a delay in these accounts. We did 2 years ago, I think, defer by a month, recognizing that we had a number of years accounts outstanding and that the team just needed to get it right, and therefore I took the decision on arriving in 2023 that the accounts would be produced a month late. That was not unusual at that time in the sector. That's the only time we've been delayed, and that was on my shoulders and my call. The accounts have been produced on time. The audit's taken place on time. There are no more resources we could throw at that to produce them any earlier. It wouldn't give us any benefit in terms of the KPMG position. And having also, I should declare, worked for KPMG, I know just how many clients Sarah, Harry, Emma will also be juggling at this time of year. So it's not an issue of lack of will to do this. It's literally a capacity issue in terms of getting this build back assurance. So there isn't a cost of delay. If I look at this from a simplistic nature and just picking up the last point, Chair, because some of our viewers may be, look, there is a trust issue that broke down with the position that we found ourselves with in terms of the backlog. The public have for hundreds of years turned to external audit to tell them whether the accounts are right or not. That is the fact of public life, and that is the right basis that it should be in. We had the breakdown of that trust. We're now having a rebuilding back of that trust. So because local authority accounts are very complex, what we end up doing is we have these usable, non-usable, cashable, non-cash reserves because we have such complicated accounts that have led to differences of practice in local government, which means we've introduced a range of technical accounting adjustments to rectify and align ourselves with other sectors reporting. One of the critical factors here is the focus in on cash. And one of the things that I'm always keen to look at is the cash to bank, to reserves, to looking at that position. So when I'm doing my checks, that's what I'm looking at to make sure around the assurance. Some of them, and as you'll have seen in today's report, and maybe we'll come on to it, there are differences of opinion, there are differences of approaches as to how and where you charge things to these technical accounts. But it's the bottom line the public are keen of. We gave you this much money. Have you spent it? Have you still got it? Have you misused it? That's the role of external audit to check. So actually the cost of this is that break in trust. The cost to get this done is a number of years in terms of that recovery. And that's the position right across this country with I think there's about 2 exceptions that were signed off. And so we will bring the timetable that we talked about before through the chief executive and the workforce expenditure control panels. We have taken cases to increase the capacity within our team. We've invested in apprenticeships. We've seen people come through the ranks in terms of gaining their professional qualifications and stay with us. Fortunately, we've been able to retain and we'll continue to do that. So that's the cost of building this back, and it continues, and that will flow into the next, hopefully next year. And as I say, hopefully 26, 27 will be back on a good footing, which leads then into the new unitaries.
Thank you, Michael. And you did say that we'd had a breakdown of trust. I imagine when you said we, you meant the local government sector rather than just Cambridgeshire County Council. And I will emphasise that in the production of accounts, the one good thing is you know all the dates well in advance. It's pretty much the same year after year, unless government again changes the date by which they have to be produced. But it's predictable, it's predicted, and it allows many months of preparation to ensure that the right people are in the right place at the right time to do the right function, so that we end up producing our accounts within the period that we've got allocated to us. And I will emphasise the professionalism which is shown by almost all councils around the country, and certainly shown by Cambridgeshire County Council in that regard. Do you want to come back at all, Ricky?
Thank you, Chair. Not really. I mean, I'm just failing to understand a little bit because I think Councillor Batt mentioned previous delays, but I'm happy to hear that there has been no real delays. So I may be missing a point here because I've heard there was a capacity gap or a capacity issue, if I'm hearing correctly. So I just want to understand, has that now been rectified? Thank you.
The main capacity gap that we've been talking about is one of the audit sector. We within Cambridgeshire County Council have been pretty much on top of the process every year. As Michael said, there was one period 2 years ago when we were a month late, but we've been pretty much on top because it is a regular process. And if we hadn't been on top of it, then there would have been something wrong with the management of our accounts department, to be quite honest. So the capacity issue, which we have been talking about, is the whole sector, and we're not just talking about KPMG or any one individual company here, but right across the sector, there's been a reduction in the number of audit firms who are willing and capable of doing local government audit, and there's been difficulty within the auditors firms generally over the last few years in attracting sufficient individuals to develop the skills and the knowledge required for local government audit, which is a quite specialised area within the accountancy profession. And with all due respect, it's not always been seen as being the most glamorous part of the accountancy profession either. So there have been difficulties, but that was one of the reasons for the reset. And according to the sector, they are now in a much stronger position. But Sarah, you'll be in a much better position to be able to comment on that than I am.
Absolutely. And I think, I just wanted to provide the committee with some assurance that certainly from a KPMG perspective, we are significantly resourced now within this sector. And therefore, whilst acknowledging the points or agreeing with the points that Michael made, that clearly there are a number of audits that will always be running at a similar time, we do have hundreds of people who are dedicated to local government audit, who are specialised in local government audit. And therefore, as long as we can agree a sensible timetable, we will make sure that we've got the resources available to obviously deliver within the timetable, and also as much of the build back as we're able to do.
Has that been helpful, Ricky?
Thank you, Chair. I did have my wires crossed. That has clarified everything, and I welcome now that in the audit sector we're significantly now resourced, and that clarifies my confusion. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed for the question. It's really important, not merely that all members of the committee are aware of this, but any members of the public who are watching also understand exactly where the problems have been and what the solution has been, and why we are still running through the implications of that solution, which is why we are at the situation that we still are with disclaimed opinions. Anna, you have a question also about the subject of disclaimed opinions and building back assurance?
Yes, thank you. Michael Hudson mentioned that we need to be ready for local government reorganisation. So my question is, what would be the impact of not having an undisclaimed opinion on our ability to proceed with local government reorganisation?
I think I'd rather answer that question, but I will leave it to our Section 151 officer to do.
I think when we look at the position for local government reorganisation, whether it's 2 or 3 unitaries, whatever way that is divided, there will be the close down of the accounts to do, and the close down of the new accounts to do. So that consolidation exercise cannot be underestimated. If we speak to colleagues up and down the country who have been through this, they warn, plan this straight away. This is going to take up the most amount of your time. It produces a number of factors. It produces a drain on the resource that is needed in terms of other tasks, from budget monitoring to treasury management, because the focus is on that consolidation. And if you carry over any element of disclaimed opinion, then that will knock on to the future year's consolidation of several sets of accounts coming into the new authority, and where that leaves the external auditors in terms of their ability to assess the opening balances. So it is one of the things that we are looking at now across Cambridgeshire and Peterborough as Section 151 officers, in terms of what we can do as a family in terms of working towards that goal collectively, not just for the county council.
Thank you, Michael. We can look at the experience elsewhere to learn what is likely to be happening here in Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. And it's not particularly great, I have to say. Let's see what happened a few years ago in Northamptonshire, when the county was abolished, all the districts were abolished, and 2 new unitaries were created. And after the vesting date, it took years for them to be able to reconcile everything, to agree splits on various things. It is not a simple and straightforward process, even if you have fully audited and non-disclaimed accounts. So I really wouldn't want to give the impression that once our accounts, and for that matter all the other councils in Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, once all of those accounts are able to be given a clean audit opinion, and one hopes it will be the case for all those councils in 27/8, but there's no guarantee of that. Even if we are in that position, it's still going to be a very, very messy, very difficult and very time-consuming process to get to the situation where the 2 or 3 new unitaries all know exactly what their financial position is. Anna.
Thank you, Chris. So let's hope that focuses minds.
I can assure you, and not merely from Cambridgeshire County Council's point of view, but I can assure you that the Section 151 officers and the accounts teams in all of our councils in Cambridgeshire and Peterborough have their minds massively focused on the challenges that they face so far as the local government reorganisation is concerned, bearing in mind that they also have to make sure that the day-to-day operations of each council also carry on smoothly and efficiently and effectively all the way up to the vesting date, which is likely to be the 1st of April 2028. So they've got that task to do as well as their day task. But I promise you, there is no lack of focus in the minds of those officers who've got responsibility for these things, including chief executives, and maybe the chief executive may care to make a comment.
Actually, Chair, my comment was going to be relatively brief. It was to endorse the points you and Michael Hudson have made, both about the workload involved, the complexity involved, and the importance of ensuring that current authorities close accounts effectively and successor authorities are set up as successfully as possible. I guess the only comment I was going to make is I wouldn't necessarily conflate Northamptonshire with what's going on in Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. Of course, Northamptonshire was a county council that went into Section 114 territory, and I wouldn't ever count them as a good example of effective local government financial management, having worked with them previously and having seen what happened to them, as well as the investigations from best value commissioners that government sent in at the time. So whilst I absolutely understand the analogy, I would probably have used a different local government reorganisation comparator. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Chief Executive. And yes, you're entirely correct. It's certainly not a good example to give. It may well be a bad example to give. But I have to say that it does no harm at all to look at the worst possible scenarios here, because what is quite certain is that things will go wrong which we haven't anticipated or thought about at all in the whole process. And we've got to have the capacity to be able to deal with all of that. Anna.
Thank you very much, Chris. I wanted to emphasise I had no intention of being flippant in my comment, and my impression is that this county council's finances are in a far better position than those at Northamptonshire. and I'm glad to hear the Chief Executive confirm that. My awareness is that staff are going to be extremely stretched doing all the things, the business as usual, as well as this. And so I just sort of wondered whether there is a divvying up required of allowance of time to enable the staff to do the work that they have to do to make sure that we do close down our accounts in a proper and business-like fashion at the time. I know they would do, because that's what they're concerned about, but it's just whether they've got enough time to do it. Thank you.
Closing down accounts is a standard process which is undertaken every year by each council. Everyone understands it. The process is pretty much repetitive. There are one or two little changes every year, but it's a fairly repetitive process which everyone understands. They know what needs to be planned for, and they know the resources which are required for that. The issue is that when local government reform comes, or as it's coming, some accounts function, especially at the more senior level, is being taken up in the coordination between the different councils in trying to prepare for local government reorganisation. We're already spending a lot of officer time in making these discussions, as Michael will no doubt be about to say. We're taking a lot of officer time in having discussions about the data sets which are going to be required and how we can make sure that we have some degree of coordination between all the different accounts systems which are in operation. But until we receive notification from government about their intended formation of specific boundaries for unitary authorities, it becomes difficult to put that theoretical work into actual practice. I can promise you officers are very much focused on that, whilst also ensuring exactly what you said, that that day-to-day work, including the production of accounts, goes ahead in a proper way. There you go, Chair. Thank you. Thank you, Michael. From my point of view, at least, your comment wasn't regarded as being flippant in any way at all. It was a really important point, and it's one which all members of the council, not merely members of the Audit and Accounts Committee, need to be aware of. Michael.
Thank you, Chair. Just wanted to confirm to councillors there is a work stream underway. I'd like to thank my fellow Section 151 officers and their deputies from across the county, because we're already working on this, and we recognise that this will be a significant piece of work because of the points that Councillor Bowden's just made there in terms of their capacity to do this during business as usual, which I would call business as usual being the close down as well as everything else. And of course, these will be future colleagues. So it's good to have that building of relationships and cross-fertilization of ideas and work. And we're already on with that.
And this whole subject, Anna, is something which I believe we as an Audit and Accounts Committee will have a larger part to play in terms of oversight over the course of the next 2 years. And I would expect that we will find that internal audit will be looking at this increasingly as the next 2 years go on. So it is a subject we'll be coming back to again and again and again. So it's really important that members do have an understanding of the basics behind it all and of our requirement to ensure that everything is still going as much according to plan as it's possible. Right. Do any other members have any comments to make about or questions about the disclaimed opinions and building back assurance? Lewis.
Just a final one, because we have been posting this undisclosed accounts for several years, and we mentioned LGR. But on the day-to-day consequences, have we noticed a erosion of public trust? You mentioned that, Michael. Also, or relationships with businesses, insurance. You mentioned, or the credibility with our partners. You know, the ICB, the JCP, the districts. Or has it put any strain on the ability for us to negotiate or obtain credit? Just a general comment on that, please.
Thank you, Michael.
Yeah, it's a really good point in terms of that last aspect, because a number of councils, I won't name them, have had experience in terms of the impact on credit. I'm pleased to say not for us. And I don't think per se in terms of the reputation wider, because this is a widely publicised issue affecting the whole of local government sector. I'm absolutely chuffed to bits in terms of the ability that we've had to retain the team, because I think that's one of the impacts and one of the risks that I foresaw in terms of coming into this, when we had a number of years that hadn't actually been closed out at that point, including objections. And today does mark quite a significant landmark for us in terms of being up to date with a move forward in terms of that disclaimed opinion. So I'm hoping that we're seeing that trust gradually built back, but within our partners, I think there's that acceptance that this is a national problem, and we're able to give them assurances in other ways in terms of how we deal with them.
Thank you, Michael. Lewis?
Chair, that's
Good. I know we've spent some time talking about disclaimed opinions and building back assurance, but it's a really, really important part of this whole process. So I'm pleased we've had this discussion. Does any member wish to say anything further on this particular subject? No, then we'll move on. Does any member wish to raise a question or make a comment about any other item to do with this? Vicky.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to touch on procurement waivers. So how many waivers and what's the total value, and why were so many submitted within days of start dates?
I'm not sure if this is this the right agenda item to consider this, Michael?
There is comment passed in the KPMG report in terms of the value for money in respect to the VFM. What I am conscious of is Sarah's not had chance to introduce any of the KPMG reports, so it might be best if we focus in on the accounts for now and then pass over onto the matter on value for money, unless Chair, you want to take this now in that order.
I think that all of these things are interconnected, so it might be an idea for me to ask Sarah if she would care to introduce the VFM side of all of this, which is in this section, and then possibly also at the same time to address the issue which has been raised by Councillor Ionades.
Sorry, so just conscious that obviously we have submitted two reports, one being our findings of the financial statements audit specifically, the second being our annual auditor's report, which focuses on the value for money findings. Did you want me to say anything with regard to, or just answer the specific?
No, I'm happy for you to introduce the whole of those reports, but in doing so, if you could specifically address the issue of procurement waivers, please.
Yes, absolutely. So the first report that we have is the year-end report, which sets out the findings of our audit of the financial statements. To be honest, we've already been through quite a lot of what is in this report, particularly with regard to the first few slides around build back assurance. And obviously, Stephen, in his introduction, also went through some of the audit adjustments. Having said that, there's a few areas that it's perhaps just important to draw out and ask if anybody's got any questions of clarification. So I'd take you to page 303 of the pack, which sets out a summary of our audit findings. What this does demonstrate is that particularly in those areas of significant audit risk, we have made very good progress. Management have provided all of the information that was required, and therefore we have been able to conclude our work in the majority of those areas. With regard to investment property in particular, you may recall from last year that we had a difference in judgment between our own specialists and those used by the council. For this year, we are content that the investment property value is materially correctly stated within the accounts. We've also completed our work with no issues with regard to management override of control and our work over pensions. And to the extent that we can conclude on valuation of land and buildings, we have without identifying any material issues. So perhaps the key area is that of this land, which there's a bit more detail later in the report, which I'll move on to in a moment. With those higher assessed audit risks, we identified no material issues with regard to the implementation of IFRS 16 or the classification of expenditure between capital and revenue. PFI, as I think Michael alluded to earlier, is quite a complex and large area for the council, and we weren't able to fully conclude our work. What I would say is that we have engaged our own specialists who've done very detailed work over the models that are used for the PFI. There were a few queries which we've gone back to management with, and actually, although we weren't able to fully conclude, we're in a very good place for 25-26, having done that quite specialist work around the models, which will make it much easier for us to undertake a little bit more work, and then we'll be comfortable to sign that off. The audit corrected and uncorrected misstatements, as I say, Stephen ran through earlier, so I wasn't intending to propose anything further. With regard to control deficiencies, there is some further detail within this report. What I would say is we haven't identified any significant control deficiencies, and therefore I don't think it's necessary to go through the detail at this committee. I will just take you to page 313 of the pack, which sets out our more detailed conclusions with regard to the recoverability of the long-term debtor with this land. What is included here is no different to as described by Stephen in his opening meeting. Just conscious that there's quite a lot of kind of quite technical detail there, so I would be happy to take any questions if there are any specifically. What I would say is that we did propose quite a few narrative adjustments within the financial statements, which we are content have been included now in the version of the statement of accounts that you see here today. If you're happy, I'll move on to the second report, which sets out our overall findings, but notably with regard to value for money. And you'll see on page 351 that we set out a summary of where we've got to in each of those areas. One point that did just note, and apologies, it will be updated in the published version, is that we refer to 23-24 findings in the table. It should be 24-25. These are our findings in relation to this year's audit. So whilst we identified a risk of significant weakness in financial sustainability, we didn't conclude any significant weakness. We did have significant weaknesses with regard to governance and improving economy, efficiency and effectiveness. I'll just move on to the detail of those, which is at, apologies, towards the end. 368. Yeah, so the recommendation is on page 368, which is in relation to DSG and in particular the recovery plan. I think it is worth noting that clearly since we undertook this work, there have been government announcements, which I'm sure are welcomed by the council, to fund a large majority of the SEND deficits that exist. So whilst that we acknowledge that that does reduce the significant risk to the finances of the council, having said that, we still think the recommendation stands because it's obviously important to have plans in place. I wasn't planning on going through any further detail. This is largely the same report that was presented to November. But perhaps if I could just ask that your question is repeated in terms of what you were specifically interested in.
Vicky.
Thank you. Yeah, my concern was that there's waivers going in within days of their start date, and that may have an impact on costs to us, if that can be clarified for me. And if so, what if not, what are the consequences of the repeated late submission? I appreciate. I mean, this is to do with, I suppose, your report in relation to procurement waivers, but it does intertwine with what we're discussing at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Vicky. Sarah?
Apologies. Yeah, I wonder whether I think the question is perhaps more specific to waivers. I wonder whether that's one for Michael.
Michael?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And just to refer members to the page, I think it's page 371. Second point to note is that we are looking here at the 24-25 accounts. So obviously that is a period that looks backwards here. And thirdly, before I do come on to the point, the position in relation to procurement, which has been reported to the Asset and Procurement Committee now for years, not necessarily months, has flagged the improvement journey that procurement has been on, as covered by internal audit reviews as well, in terms of its improvement. And one of those relates to the waivers position. I think on arrival of the chief executive, new waiver procedures were put in place because this was recognised by former auditors as being an issue of significant concern. So one of the many controls that were introduced and implemented by our head of procurement and commercial was this process in relation to waivers. Waivers will always be needed as part of a complex and large-scale business such as ours, but it's making sure that we follow due process in terms of that. So what we saw in the early years was significant concern raised over large value waivers, and what we have seen, and as is reported to the Asset and Procurement Committee on a quarterly basis, we have seen a continuation of waivers, but a significant reduction in the value of those waivers. And apologies, I can't remember those off the top of my head, but they are and have been reported publicly to the Asset and Procurement Committee on regular frequency. Where issues still arise, the procurement and commercial team that sits within finance and resources picks that up with the relevant directorate and service, carries out training, and even has the power to remove delegations as such. But these waivers are then needing to be approved and are seen by the statutory officers in that process, and at which point there'll be various questions depending on the case-by-case nature of the elements of this. So they have improved in terms of has any sorry, I can't remember the exact phrasing, but money lost been incurred as a result of the going through the waiver process. We haven't identified those issues. What we've identified is a failure to comply with our own processes and their correction of that.
Thank you. And I can say from my perspective, Vicky, for the last 4 or 5 years, it's been a subject which I've raised repeatedly at committees, possibly to Section 151 officers' annoyance, that I've really focused on it. And I can confirm that there has been a significant improvement in our procurement processes generally. And also there has been a reduction in the impact, a potential impact of the procurement waivers. There will never be a situation where there will be no procurement waivers, since some waivers are caused by factors which are outside the control of the council. So we will never get to the zero target that we might want. But there is a feedback loop which is in process, where when waivers are granted and when it is discovered that that is something which should have been anticipated by our own staff, that is fed back into the system to try to ensure that in future it gets better. And generally that feedback loop has worked. But we originally only looked at the number of waivers which were being granted, which was high. And it's only fairly recently in the last year or two, that we've moved to look also at the value of those. So it is under control, it is being looked at, it can always be improved, and it will never get to zero. Vicky.
Thank you. No, I really welcome the improvements we've made. That's really good to hear, and I appreciate that would never get to zero. Just to clarify, do we not see any significant impact then that these waivers have on the audit differences and in regards to building back better? Thank you.
I think really I ought to let Sarah give a first answer to that.
Apologies, could you just repeat?
Yes, sorry. So just to clarify, the effect of the waivers, do they have any significant impact then in regards to the audit differences and the rebuilding back?
No, we don't consider there's any issue with regard to the financial statements themselves. It's a value for money consideration, but we didn't feel it necessary to draw that out as a particular weakness.
Thank you. That clarifies. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Vicky. Anna, on the subject of procurement waivers?
No, slightly different. Finished.
I'll come to you then next. Does anyone else have any questions to ask about procurement waivers? Questions or comments? No? Anna.
Thank you very much. I wanted to ask, it's on page 371 under the heading of improving economy, efficiency and effectiveness. And it's a comment about the way we have handled the debt that has been accrued at this land. I'll read it. The result of this was a conversion of 59.9 million of outstanding £120 million loan balance being converted to a capital contribution, as detailed on page 17, resulting in a reduction in future cash flows due to these capital contributions carrying no interest and having a very low probability of being repaid in full. Now, I know this action was taken as a necessity, but can I just ask the auditor's view of how that leaves us as a council approaching LGR, and indeed just our general cash flow arrangements?
Thank you very much indeed, Anna. Sarah.
Thank you. So I think, as hopefully is clear in that wording, effectively our view is that 59.9 million, as it has now been converted to capital grant or capital contribution, there is a low probability of that being recovered by the council, and the council have acknowledged that, I think we should say, within the statement of accounts. That does mean that the cash flow that will be received by the council is less than would have been intended when this loan was initially provided. Having said that, in terms of the impact on the reserves, we are content that that impact has been reflected correctly within the financial statements, and we don't consider that it causes in and of itself a significant financial sustainability issue for the council. The council does continue to have, in relative terms, sufficient general fund reserves and other reserves to continue as a viable council.
Thank you. Michael?
Yeah, thank you. There's two things obviously here. Just want to separate out. There's the treatment within the accounts, which Sarah's just covered off, and then there's the position within the council's own financial standing. So if I refer councillors again back to my report to the Strategy, Resources and Performance Committee at the end of January, where I noted that the risk related to this land was significantly reduced from prior years, that was because we had addressed this position in terms of then also making the corrections around the minimum revenue provision going forward and providing for that within the medium-term financial plan. I'd also just like to note, again, we covered this in the July committee, just after we made the transactions and we had produced the draft statement of accounts. The council overall, in broad numbers, will have loaned the company £126 million at the end of the conclusion of the current estate that sits within this land for which the loans were secured, as was reported to the shareholders subcommittee on Tuesday in public forum. The business plan sets out that over the period of this land, the company will have repaid back slightly more than 126 million in loan and interest to the council. The initial transaction also enabled the council to then enter into commercial ventures, which have provided significant return over that period. So in terms of the overall cash flow position of the council, it neither impacts on financial sustainability nor has the council seen a loss.
Thank you. Anna, would you care to come back on any of that?
No, that's fine. Thank you very much.
Right. Since the subject of this land has been opened up, I'm happy to take any questions that anyone may have on that. Just to address one comment that Anna made, you asked about the impact so far as LGR is concerned, and I think you are completely correct on everything now to raise the question of, well, what will the impact of LGR be on all of this? And in principle, this land is one of the simplest parts of the council's, the various councils' finances to be able to deal with, because we are only dealing with a very small number of variables: a loan, a capital infusion, the share capital. It's fairly simple and straightforward in terms, although the numbers are very big. The principles are a lot easier than many other parts of what needs to be divvied up, for want of a better word, when the LGR process takes place, because whichever of the options is chosen by central government, the assets and liabilities of Cambridgeshire County Council will need to be divided up between new successor unitary authorities. This may be one of the simpler ones to do, even if the numbers involved are very large. Right, so on the subject of this land, would anyone care to make any? Ricky.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to understand, because I mean, I've asked questions previously on this land, and when there was the conversion to the grant, so-called, we were informed that we would see this money returned to us, even though it was, it's not secured anymore. But now that I'm hearing via KPMG's audit that it's a low likelihood, I'd like that clarified. Is it low likelihood, or are we going to receive that money back? Thank you.
Right. Would you care? Are you asking that for the auditors to answer first, or for the officers to explain first? I'll go to both of them, of course. Who would you like to answer that first?
Could I get the auditor's opinion first? Thank you.
Of course. Sarah.
Thank you. So I think, as Michael's just said, based on the existing business plan, the latest business plan would suggest that the majority of that is not recoverable. Whether that may change is a different matter, but in terms of the financial position and the forecast position as it stands today, our understanding is that the majority of that balance isn't expected to be recovered.
Thank you. Michael.
Okay, so if we look and go all the way back to 2016 to 18 when the company was set up, and all of this has been through the shareholder subcommittee in public forum, so I'm not saying anything that I haven't previously said before or hasn't been subject to scrutiny by that subcommittee. The council had a expectation that there would be a very high level of return, and it also gave the council a way of converting capital to revenue in that sense. Unfortunately, what happened only a few years later was a global pandemic, followed by an economic crisis triggered by a number of events, including the war in Ukraine, which saw the housing and property market significantly hit. That has caused delays and issues to all housing development companies, up and across the land, and many have gone insolvent during that period. So the council has taken the view that we loaned the company a certain amount of cash. We had assumed that we would make a significant return on that. To have a company that survives, enables the building of homes within Cambridgeshire in particular. Large elements of the stock is held within Cambridgeshire, and I think the total houses planned to be built as a result of the land that's being developed by this land is over 3,000 homes. So the social value of return cannot be ruled out of that. But what we do recognise now is that in the totality between cash from interest and cash from loans, the council will see its full investment repaid. It's not a huge return. It's not the return that was expected back in 2016 to 18 when the company was first thought. What we have done with the £59 million is, though, we have stressed that it is a performance grant. So if you go on this land's accounts, which were audited and signed off back in August 25, they still have the full carrying amount of that debt. Officers are exploring ways in which that performance grant element can be materialised. Do we expect the full 59 million to materialise? No, I've been quite clear of that in various other forums. But I come back to the point of we won't lose cash either. But there are opportunities that we are pursuing that could see further cash come into the council through that venture. Unfortunately, that is commercially sensitive, and that's why I'm picking my words in relation to that. So we are actively pursuing those channels to get some of that money back, which would make that an even greater return. And the aspect I referred to earlier in terms of the commercial investment estate, again, that's reported to the Asset and Procurement Committee, was a byproduct of that initial deal. And we can't lose sight that that has given a significant return on nearly the entire estate. We've had one slippage in one of the commercial investments in recent years, but the others, in fact, one of them has significantly outperformed. So that's the position as it stands at the moment. There is no cash loss. We are actively working to see what element of that additional loan element that is now non-interest bearing could be repaid.
Thank you. Ricky.
Thank you. No, I appreciate that. And I do appreciate as well that there is obviously commercially sensitive information. So on that then, can I request a closed session briefing to be arranged at some point, if possible, with myself?
I think that officers are always willing to speak to members of the committee. Michael?
Chair, the council has set up the shareholders subcommittee to deal with all matters relating to the companies, and there are companies, including this land and all businesses done through the shareholder subcommittee.
Thank you, but I think that Ricky was making his request as a member of the Audit and Accounts Committee, and particularly the audit oversight function that we've got. I assume that was the case, Ricky.
That is correct.
And I just wonder whether some briefing could be given to Ricky in that context, please.
Again, Chair, just restating all business relating to this land goes through the shareholder subcommittee. It needs to be a specific and clarified point in terms of what the audit committee's aspects of that, without drawing the monitoring officer into this discussion at this stage. I think that's the position that we're in.
Thank you. If, Ricky, you could devise a specific request and put it in writing to officers relating to the work of this committee in respect of this land, then I'm sure that officers will respond accordingly.
Thank you, Chair. That's understood, and I'll do so. Thank you.
Thank you. Anna, about this land? Thank you.
Thank you. I'm confused because, it's probably just ignorance, but KPMG are telling us that this debt has a very low probability of being repaid, and she has confirmed that later. and said, based on existing business plan, the majority is not recoverable. In terms of the forecast position, do not expect to recover that. Sorry, that's my brief notes. Whereas Michael Hudson is saying this has been cash neutral. So can you just explain why those 2 points are being run alongside each other?
Thank you, Anna. I believe that both statements are in fact correct, and I see that both our auditor and our Section 151 officer are nodding at that. Michael, would you care to be slightly more explicit and less technical in explaining the trade-off, for want of a better word, between loans which may not be repaid and interest which may be earned by the council?
So I think, Chair, if I may start by saying earlier on you talked about the impact of LGR and this land and it being a fairly straightforward standardized transaction. I can't tell you how many meetings I've left with our accountancy team and advisors with a hot towel wrapped around my head trying to recover. So in terms of simplicity, yes, both statements are correct. Firstly, I'm looking at the cash position when I make my statement in terms of the overall lifespan of the company and the cash that we will see coming back into the coffers of the council. The position in terms of the accounting, however, in terms of how that is reflected, and I think in Stephen's introduction, he referred to pages 27 onto page 28 in terms of paragraphs 2.110 and 2.111. What we have to do is we have to recognise that credit loss on the balance sheet in terms of its original status as a loan, and that's what we've done in terms of that. There is an issue that's set out at 2.111 in terms of which line of the comprehensive income and expenditure account we have charged it to. However, the impact of making any adjustments, as discussions with KPMG have suggested, are on different lines within the comprehensive income and expenditure account statement, and therefore there's a no difference and a non-material impact on the statement of accounts. So what we're trying to do here is correct the income and expenditure in the balance sheet position to reflect the current standing, whereas what I was referring to was talking about the actual cash flow over the years. Chair, that may not have been the best explanation, and I will call on Stephen Howarth if he wants to pick that up in terms of the difference of the interest payments, and then maybe Sarah as well.
I think, sorry,
Thank you. Stephen.
I think just to help Councillor Bradnam, I think fundamentally the difference between the cash basis that Michael was talking about and the loan value that that Sarah from KPMG was talking about is that over the life of the loan, this land will have paid substantial interest to the council. So that's not factored into the loan value on the balance sheet, but over the, whatever it's been, 8-10 years of the life of the loan, the company will have paid substantial interest to the council, which makes it, as Michael's described, broadly neutral.
Sarah, do you want to give an answer, and we'll then come back to Anna, please?
Okay, I think put as simply as I can possibly think of is that the initial intention, had everything worked out as planned, would have been for the 120 million to have been recovered plus all of the interest, which would be significantly more than 120 million. So the initial intention or expectation, all going well, would have been for much more to be recovered. What has happened because of various things, you know, some of which outside of this land's control, have been that rather than 120 plus lots of interest being recovered, effectively 60 million plus lots of interest will essentially be recovered. So from a cash position, yes, we are expecting that more than 120 million should be recovered by the council, but the point being that is less than what was initially intended, and therefore that's why it's appropriate to write down the 60 million within the statement of accounts, which is what has happened.
Thank you very much.
So I can't help but feel that these explanations are getting simpler and more straightforward every time, but with simplicity, of course, you lose some of the nuance of what's behind it all. Anna.
Yes. Thank you very much for the explanations. That's fine.
Right, we're still on the subject of this land. Ricky.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just recalling back to a previous meeting that we had in regards to when we were looking at making this change. And it was the question was asked, is this a write-off? And we were specifically told this is not a write-off, but this appears as a write-off. Am I correct?
I'm not sure that write-off is the technical term. Sarah?
I think effectively if I talk in accounting terms, there was 120 million of long-term debtors on the balance sheet. 60 million of that has been written down, and therefore there is 60 million remaining. The way that was transacted was as a conversion to grant, but effectively the debtor has been written down. I think that is a fair statement.
Just again, to make sure that we get our terminology right, and I'm not disputing you've written down, but that effectively is a provision rather than a write-off. Would you agree?
I mean, write down or write off isn't necessarily a technical accounting term anyway. From our perspective, the important thing is that there has been a charge through the income and expenditure account. There has been a charge through the income and expenditure account. Our preference as the auditors, which we've reflected in our report, is that that would have been shown as a separate line as an impairment. What management have done is presented it slightly differently, albeit the effect is the same. There has been a charge through the income and expenditure account, and the impact on reserves is as we would expect it to be.
And we can start discussing the difference between having it as an impairment and having it as a revenue expenditure funded from capital under statute. But I think that technical discussion might actually create more confusion than actually shines a light on things. Ultimately, the effect on the bottom line remains the same. But Ricky.
No, thank you. I just wanted to get that in. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Still on the subject of this land, any other comments, questions anyone wishes to raise? Oh, Mohammed, my apologies.
Hi.
Mohammed.
I just had a question on note 21 around contingent liabilities. So my understanding is we wrote down some of the loan to support with cash flow essentially. And separately, this land has entered into a bond agreement which is backstopped by the council, which is marked as a low risk in terms of having to come in to repay any of those amounts. There's no numbers in there, so I just wanted to understand what work was done as part of the audit just to make sure that those repayments can be made and the council wouldn't have to intervene.
Thank you. Sarah.
Sorry, forgive me, just give me a second to find note 21 in the financial statements.
Sure. It was 41, sorry, on 179.
179. Okay, apologies. Yeah, just to remind myself. So this is in relation to the council effectively providing guarantees should there be any ongoing issues with the quality of the homes that are produced by this land. As at the balance sheet date that we're auditing, we haven't identified any issues with regard to any potential warranty payments, provisions or claims with that to that regard. Clearly, each balance sheet date, we would reassess that to see whether there is anything that would require guarantee or support by the council. The reason this is included as a contingent liability is to draw attention to the fact that that warranty exists, but there is no provision because effectively there have been no claims made either against this land or the council.
Yeah, just going back on that, I think there's 2 points there. So the second paragraph is the bit you're talking about around the warranty, and the paragraph before that, it references a bond provided for the purpose of enabling this land to undertake infrastructure. As the first kind of paragraph I was asking about there. Is that the same thing or?
No, that the first one is slightly different in that effectively this is the council providing a bond should it need to step in, but we are not aware, given the changes that have been made to the business plan, and the business plan that we have seen reflects that this land has sufficient cash to be able to effectively meet its cash flow needs. So yes, this is a slightly separate issue. This is saying that council would step in as needed, but we have seen no indication that that would be needed based on the latest forecast position of this land.
Okay, fine. I guess the reason I was asking from the user of the council, obviously we are writing down some of the loan converting things, and at the same time you've got a low risk of the council needs to be getting involved, or we've got involved in a different way. But yeah, I take the point.
Just to add to that, it is quite common if you've got a subsidiary company with limited debt access to debt facilities that often suppliers, construction companies would ask for some form of warranty or guarantee to be provided.
Sure, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mohammed. Any other comments or questions from anyone on this land as it relates to this agenda item? No, right, we can move on. Any further questions that anyone wishes to raise? Graham.
Could somebody give us an update on where we are with the objections to the accounts? I notice on page 30 it says the council is in the process of providing information to the external auditor on the parts of the objection which the auditor has agreed to conduct detailed work on. And I'd just be interested in knowing how we're getting on, and then as a supplementary, whether we have any further information about what it's likely to cost the council to deal with it.
Just for clarification, are you just talking about the 24/5 objection, or do you want an answer about objections generally?
I thought the previous objection, 23/24 one, had the KPMG have decided to take no further action in respect of this objection and have issued that determination to the objector. So unless the objector has come back with more information, I'm assuming that's finished, and I'm concentrating on 24/25 accounts.
Excellent. Just want to make sure that we were just talking about 24/25. Sarah.
Thank you. So just to, I guess, for completeness, we have concluded 23/24, and that the window for further challenge has closed. Therefore, there will be no further action taken with regard to that. With regard to the 24/25 objection, we are just waiting a bit more information from the council before we're able to take that further. We have agreed that we will look into the matters that were raised by the objector. We have asked questions of the council, and once we have that, all of that information, we will conduct our work. I guess to your question around cost, we do expect that actually quite a lot of the elements of the 24/25 objection were quite linked to the work that we've done with regard to the audit of the financial statements themselves. And obviously we did do significant work in the prior year, as well as seeking legal advice. So hopefully once we have the information from the council, we're expecting to try to conclude that position as soon as possible.
Thank you, Sarah. Graham?
I just wonder whether Michael or Stephen wants to update us on where we are with providing this additional information to the external auditor.
Thank you, Graham. Michael?
Yeah, I signed off a copy of the response yesterday. I think Tom Kelly was just going to do one kind of final go through, so that should be with them imminently.
Thank you. Stephen, do you have anything to add? Right. Graham? Good, thank you. Any other comments from anyone or questions about the objections? No. Right, move on to the next subject. Vicky.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to make sure that it's appropriate we can cover some the DSG and safety valve now.
To the extent that it relates to the audit, yes.
So thank you, Chair. In the internal audit, it still shows the essential DSG safety valve recommendation as overdue. So
I think well, we can deal with that when we get to the internal audit side. And I think that auditors were very well aware of the DSG implications, particularly at the year end. And we're talking about the accounts as of the 31st of March 25. And a comment has already been made that auditors are aware of the change which has taken place since then. Is there anything you'd like to add to that, please, in terms of potential liability, which should be shown in these accounts as far as DSG is concerned, Sarah?
No, I'm content that there's no further liability to or any financial impact to this set of financial statements. And as I mentioned earlier, I think the financial exposure to the council is clearly reduced as a result of recent government announcements. We have continued to make the recommendation around enhancing the oversight of the DSG recovery plan. And we've also noted that that does link to some of the findings that have been made by internal audit. You'll see in the management response on page 368 of our annual auditor's report that the response provided by the Education Service Director does reflect the actions that are being taken specifically in response to both our point and those that have previously been made by internal audit. So I think whilst the financial exposure is significantly reduced, we have no issue with anything that's presented in the statement of accounts. I think it's still appropriate for that recommendation to be seen through.
Thank you. Insofar as this relates to the audit for 24/5, do you have any further questions on this, Ricky?
No, thank you, Chair.
Mohammed, on this subject, DSG?
Yes, I had a question on that. So either as part of Note 18 on dedicated school grants, there isn't any reference to the information that's come out in the last 2-3 weeks in terms of the government absorbing 90% of those balances. So either as part of that note or consideration as part of a post-balance sheet event, given the material nature of the impact that will have, is something I was thinking is worth considering.
Thank you very much indeed. And it is a very post-balance sheet event indeed, given that it's only just happened. But I'm not sure that that announcement will actually change any part of the opinion that auditors had about the position as of the 31st of March 25. Sarah?
That's correct. There's no provision or otherwise made within the financial statements themselves that would therefore warrant a post-balance sheet event. Having said that, if the council wanted to make reference to it in the front end of the statement of accounts, in the annual governance statement or otherwise, that's a matter for the council.
Thank you. Michael?
Yeah, the one thing I would note, Chair, is that at this moment in time, we only have a statement. We don't have the detail. So whilst not wanting to, not wanting to dispel the position that has been reported, we don't know yet whether that 90% equates to 90% or a different number. So until we have certainty, I wouldn't want to report it for that fact alone, as well as the points that Sarah's made.
Thank you. Ricky?
I'm going to save a question up. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Right, we should move on then. Does anyone else have any comments or questions to make about DSG as far as the audit is concerned and the accounts? Nope, can move on. Any further item that anyone would like to raise related to the audit differences and the statement of accounts and the auditor's reports to us? No further comments or questions from anyone? Does anyone want to make any general comment or question about this agenda item? I'll make what? Oh, Ricky.
I just want to clarify on this agenda item, are we going to vote and note reports individually, or is it going to be as a whole? Thank you.
I was intending to go as a whole, but if you would like any part of it to be done individually, I'm perfectly happy to do that. Is there any part you would like to be done individually, Ricky?
Yes. In regards to the audit differences, I'd like to take that separate.
Fine, I've got no objection to that. And in fact, the comment I was just about to make was about the report on audit differences, which we have in Appendix 1. And I need to bring it to the attention of the committee that what we have here is more than most audit committees in councils get. In many cases, all of the audit adjustments, all of the audit findings, which are immaterial, are not reported to the audit committee and are not discussed by the audit committee. And I'm grateful to officers for having agreed a number of years ago now that all of these audit differences are reported to the audit committee, so we have a chance to see them, to examine them, and to ask questions about them, even where they are not material to the audit opinion, which is finally agreed for the set of accounts concerned. So my gratitude to officers for making that adjustment a few years ago, and I will emphasise not all council audit committees have the advantage of what we have in Appendix 1. Right, any other comments or questions from anyone? Right, then we'll move to the report recommendations. I'll take A by itself and then B to E. The committee is being asked, first of all, in A, to endorse the treatment of audit differences set out in Appendix 1. Those in favour, please show. Those against? And abstentions? Member Services?
Thank you, Chair. That's carried by a majority vote.
Thank you for that. Democratic Services, right. We can now move on to the other recommendations. B, to note and comment on the final statement of accounts for 24-25 set out in Appendix 2, and to authorise the chair of the committee to sign the final accounts. C, to note and comment on KPMG's year-end report to the Audit and Accounts Committee, which is in Annex A. D, to note and comment on KPMG's auditor's annual report, which is Annex B. And E, to authorise the chair of the committee to sign the letter of representation to the external auditor shown in Annex C. Those in favour, please show. Democratic Services. Thank you very much indeed. Right, thank you for that. Our next item is the regular internal audit progress report. I do note that we're coming up towards our 2-hour limit. Thank you very much indeed, Stephen, for your attendance. Much appreciated. We are coming up towards the 2-hour limit. May I suggest, rather than interrupting the next agenda item, that we take a 10-minute break now and that we return at 11:52. Thank you. Vicente, are we ready to start? Right, thank you very much indeed. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, and members of the public who are watching. The next item is the item 5, Regular Internal Audit Progress Report, which will be introduced by Mairead Claydon, who is our Head of Internal Audit and Risk Management. Mairead.
Thank you, Chair. So this item is our regular progress report. A few key things to highlight. Section 3 has our usual summary of audit reports issued as draft and final. And in Section 4, we have a summary of the response to health and safety incidents audit, which had a limited opinion on the control environment. This report had a good opinion on compliance with controls, which is reflected correctly at Table 1, but is incorrectly recorded as moderate in paragraph 4.1.1. So just to flag, the compliance opinion on that audit was good. Normally, we would present a full updated audit plan for the next 4 quarters at Section 6. This is going to be coming to the next meeting of this committee on 26th of March as a standalone report, so we haven't included that in the current report. Section 7 shows implementation of outstanding actions. And just to note that we've amended the format of Table 8. So this now shows both the number of recommendations that have been opened for each directorate since the last report and the number of recommendations that have been closed. Section 9 shows our investigations caseload. As with previous reports, we're maintaining quite a high caseload. We are also, fortunately, quite consistently closing investigations as well, which is positive in terms of our resource management. And Section 10, finally, includes an update on key financial systems. So we're completing reviews of bank reconciliation and general ledger this year within Cambridgeshire, in addition to the shared audits we do with other local authorities. And we've also recently issued an audit report into risk management in the pension fund, which gave a good opinion. So happy to take any questions on the report.
Thank you very much indeed, Mairead, and thank you again for a very clear report given to us. Members, any comments or questions on this report? Let's start off with Graham.
The health and safety incident internal audit on page 395. We've done a tremendous amount of work on improving health and safety generally across the council. So I was disappointed to read that the system design assurance was limited and assurance over compliance was moderate. I just wonder whether you or the chief executive would like to add a bit more about health and safety and what we're doing as a result of your recommendations. Thank you.
Yeah, very happy to comment on that. So the first thing I would note is that this is quite a specific audit. It's not an audit of the entire health and safety system. It's very specifically looking at how we respond when there is an incident. So what we're looking for is kind of twofold. Firstly, around compliance with things like reporting of injuries, diseases, and dangerous occurrences regulations, and then secondly, having identified an incident and made a report, are we then corporately monitoring how we respond to that? And what we found was that the first part, in terms of the reporting, actually we have quite strong, well-established systems around making those riddle reports. But what we're not necessarily seeing is that, as in terms of the council's corporate centre, that we have that assurance that each individual incident has the actions being taken that need to be taken, and that is being monitored centrally. So that's not to say that there aren't clear requirements on local services to address incidents appropriately, because there are. But what it's saying is that CLT or yourselves as members can't sort of look at that as a report and understand, well, over the course of the last year, what actions were recommended, how many of those have been implemented, etc. So it's more about the assurance side of things and that kind of quality assurance over the whole system being missing, and that's what's taken down the overall assurance on the report.
Thank you, Chief Executive.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to Councillor Wilson for the question. Again, just to be clear, because Mairead said this in her introduction, Councillor Wilson, the compliance assurance rating is good, not moderate. There is an error in one of the tables in the report, but the compliance assurance rating for this report is actually good. So just start with that, because I think you referenced it being moderate when you asked the question. So I just wanted to make that crystal clear. In terms of the points that have been raised, first of all, I would just make the point that there is no requirement, no mandated requirement from the Health and Safety Executive or in law for us to have a centralised system for health and safety reporting purposes, which the audit report does point out. In a large complex organisation like this, clearly what we want to do is make sure that the relevant areas are properly empowered, but really importantly are also accountable for the delivery of their health and safety responsibilities. What we have done within the course of the last 12 months, which won't necessarily have been reflected in this audit because of the timing it was undertaken, I think it was the first time we produced an annual report on health and safety that was scrutinised by the Strategy, Resources and Performance Committee. Previously, health and safety has not been formally reported to committee, so that was something I asked to have introduced. We've also reviewed and strengthened the policy, and internally have also strengthened the operational governance arrangements to ensure that that is stronger. I think the key point of the audit finding is, should we consider having some form of more centralised recording system that enables the corporate health and safety team to follow up and check that all actions are not only being completed, which we do see, it's actually the issue of, can we identify root cause analysis issues or consistent themes that are more organisation wide that need to be addressed. So it's one of those classic problems of how much do you centralise versus how much do you empower. As far as I'm concerned, from a health and safety perspective, and Chair, you've heard me say this on other things previously, I have a very low tolerance of risk in this area, almost a zero tolerance risk on health and safety. So on that basis, I would be looking at how we can better strengthen the system arrangements to provide better centralised coordination and tracking. And I think that's something now that the health and safety team sits within my office, we will be taking forward relatively quickly. Thank you.
Thank you. Graham?
No, I'm happy with those responses, and apologies that I was reading the old version and not picking up the new comments that Mairead had correctly said. Thank you.
Graham, an interesting comment from the Chief Executive about the corporate element of this to do with health and safety generally. And I just wonder if the Chief Executive would make any comment about also including within the corporate oversight the near misses which take place rather than merely the incidents. Whilst obviously the incidents are important and there's a statutory responsibility, near misses are also an important part of any health and safety policy overall.
Thank you, Chair. You'll be pleased to hear that as part of the formal monthly reporting of health and safety dashboards to the corporate leadership team, near misses that are reported are fully included in there. And we do also take efforts to try and encourage the reporting of near misses across the organisation. I have to say, the reporting of near misses is something that, having held health and safety responsibilities for well over 20 years, I have struggled to get various parts of the public sector to embrace, and I am sorry to say that even included police firearms teams, which in itself is not particularly encouraging. So needless to say, we will continue to do all that we can to improve near-miss reporting, because that actually helps identify issues that otherwise could lead to accidents, injuries, or other forms of health and safety breaches. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Executive. This, of course, is a matter of the culture of the organisation, and I know that that's something which you lead on with some degree of concern and of action. Anna, is your question about health and safety? Anyone else? Health and safety? Ricky.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate the want to improve culture, etc. But I'd like to just touch on something in regards to health and safety that I personally experienced since being a councillor here. At full council, at the last full council meeting, I actually tripped over a wire and hurt myself. It was noted by those that were sitting in the meeting, but no report was ever asked of me. So can I ask what's happening with that in regards to culture? I think we should be promoting those who witness accidents within the building itself and other places to report this.
Thank you very much indeed, and that's a very worrying question for you to raise. And whilst we are really talking about the internal audit here, I think that that's an important enough question to ask the Chief Executive if he's got some comment to make.
Yep, thank you, Chair, and thank you to Councillor Ioannidis for raising that. Two elements. One is disappointed to hear that hasn't been reported by the person witnessing it. So perhaps Councillor Ioannidis and I can talk about that outside the meeting. And secondly, of course, we will want to make sure and remind all our elected members that, of course, you do have a personal duty to respond and report incidents. So we need to make sure you're aware of and understand how to do that as well. So perhaps we can follow up on the specifics, which I'm very sorry to hear about, but equally we just want to reaffirm that we would encourage everybody, elected or employed or contractors or visitors, to report incidents and be aware of how to report incidents. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Vicky?
No, thank you. I appreciate that. It wasn't really a complaint on my part. It was just I wanted to highlight that so that we can improve going forward. Thank you.
This is all a matter of process, and it's entirely appropriate for you to raise that. Anything else about health and safety from anyone? No? Anna?
Thank you, Chris. Right, so I was looking at the cases on and around pages 408, 409. And although these don't deal directly with cybersecurity, they triggered in my mind a query about what this council is doing to protect itself against cyber attacks. And I just wondered, is that so there were two questions. What's the council doing? And does a summary, obviously these of necessity don't go into detail, but does a report on cybersecurity come to this committee ever?
May I first of all look at this from the point of view of internal audit and invite Mairead to make comment about it, and then I think other officers may wish to make more general comments about your question, Anna. Mairead.
Thank you. So from the internal audit perspective, we work quite closely with the cybersecurity team in IT to share intelligence in either direction about specific concerns around fraud and cases that have come into us, and also around putting out communications to officers if we notice that there's a pattern in particular issues that are coming up. But probably best for Michael to comment as he's got the cyber team within his remit.
Thank you very much indeed, Mairead. Michael.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Mairead. Yes, I'll pick my words carefully because obviously an awful lot of this that we do report is in confidential session. So we do have robust cyber controls. We cover the risk register in the confidential session in relation to strategy, resources and performance, and brought that here. And I think, and it was in the action log, following a recommendation, I think, by Councillor Ioannidis and supported by the Chair, we have agreed to bring a more detailed paper back to this committee next month at its next meeting. So we will be doing further follow-up to that. We held a members training session in early January. Unfortunately, given the confidential nature of that, we are not able to and do not record those sessions. So I would implore councillors, if they are able to attend, we will be running further sessions on that, and we do further briefings in that. But otherwise, Chair, there will be a report, signed it off yesterday, coming to this committee in March.
Thank you. Anna?
And, obviously one would expect that that is being done, and I just wondered whether, because it's important that that process is audited and monitored, and I appreciate it's probably going to strategy and resources, but thank you for the response, Michael.
I can assure you, Anna, not merely do management take the matter of cybersecurity very seriously, but internal audit do as well, and internal audit do a significant amount of work in this area, and there is quite a bit which is done which members do not know about or which are not reported publicly for very obvious reasons in this particular area. Chief Executive.
Just one other point.
Sorry.
It occurs to me that if it's all working properly, it should be silent.
Thank you very much indeed. But it is appropriate that there is oversight that the process is actually taking place. Chief Executive.
Thank you, Chair. I just endorse the comments from the Executive Director of Finance and Resources. I would also just like to reiterate for the benefit of members that cybersecurity is a matter and cyber fraud and crime is a matter that is also reflected in the Council's Corporate Risk Register and flows through into the Finance and Resources Risk Register as well. As members may be aware that that part of the Risk Register, just as the broader report Michael's outlined that will be coming back to this committee, that part of the Risk Register would be dealt with an exempt session because, of course, we don't want to disclose all of our defences in a public arena. The point to Councillor Bradnam's question, I would say, however, is this council is externally required to achieve a range of national standards around cybersecurity, as are all public authorities, and that's something this council takes very seriously. And helpfully, some years ago, as Councillor Bowden probably remembers, and indeed Councillor Wilson, there was focused work from the Audit and Accounts Committee to ensure that this council was taking those steps. But I can confirm that we retain those accreditations and actually achieved that on first submission during the course of the last 12 months, which is important. Thank you.
Thank you. Anna?
That's great. So we are unlikely to be in the situation of Jaguar Land Rover or indeed Marks and Spencers, because it's not just the impact at the time, it's the recovery time that is so difficult to manage. So I'm happy that it's being dealt with elsewhere and that reports will come to this committee, but thank you.
Chief Executive.
Chair, if I may, just one final comment on this particularly important matter, and again, thank you to Councillor Bradnam for the questions and the comments. I think the observation I would always make about matters relating to cybersecurity is we would never say we can guarantee the council is protected to 100%, because every single day cyber criminals, whether they're state-sponsored actors or individual groups or other forms, they are consistently updating, renewing and finding new ways to attack authorities, governments and other businesses. You mentioned Jaguar Land Rover. So this is one of those areas where I am afraid every business, every public authority is always playing catch up, because of course even areas like the Ministry of Defence or the National Cybersecurity Centre, they are always trying to keep ahead of the people that are actually trying to attack authorities, organisations, or indeed individuals. And it is a constant battle to keep ahead. And if I'm really honest, that's why I would never say we can guarantee with absolute surety the council will be safe. What we can say is we take every step we reasonably can, take all the professional advice available to us, and we do try and re-encourage a culture of security internally, by having essential learning for all members of staff around cybersecurity behaviours that would benefit them in their personal lives as well as in their professional roles. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I'm reluctant to move too far away from the internal audit report itself, but this is an important matter and I know it will be coming to the next committee meeting. Ricky.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to make a comment on that. And I'm sure and I'm pleased that the council is doing its all in regards to cybersecurity. But I'd just like to comment and note that every member, including ourselves, are also responsible. Hence why the training that was provided, I was on that training that the council provided, is very good. So those councillors who have not taken that training, I would suggest at the next available opportunity that you do. Also, as someone who worked alongside NCSC, they used to have, I'm not sure if they do now, but it'd be worth having a look. They used to have a cybersecurity course on their website for free. So, to do our part, I would really highly recommend that you go and have a look and see if you can take part in that free course on their website. It's really, it gives really good insight and good tips and processes to follow to keep this council and everybody cybersecurity safe.
Thank you very much indeed. That's a really helpful comment. Thank you. Right. Oh, Chief Executive.
Chair, I wonder if I might beg an indulgence and recognise that the questions around cybersecurity probably related more to the contents of the report aligned to whistleblowing. I wondered if you might allow me to make a few remarks about whistleblowing, which is obviously an important subject for this committee.
Thank you, Chief Executive. It's something which this committee has given a lot of support to in the past, and it's not as simple and straightforward process. So yes, please do.
Thank you, Chair. I think I just wanted to highlight the fact that whistleblowers are an important part of how we find out about risk to the council, but they are not the council's first line of defence in respect of whistleblowing matters. The council, like many other organisations, particularly in the public sector, adopts what I would best describe as the 3 lines of defence model. So we have the people that are providing services, we have the people at the second level who help or advise them, such as our finance team, and then we have that 3rd line of defence, which is things like I would describe them as the checkers, so the doers, the helpers, the checkers. The 3rd line of defence is our internal audit team, and obviously the work of external audit and other regulators that we are subject to. So I think, Chair, as this committee, and certainly members of the committee that have been involved in this area for some time will appreciate, raising concerns, speaking up and whistleblowing is something that this council has actively sought to encourage from a position of very low levels of reporting in previous years. We have significantly shifted with that, and I am pleased that we are seeing more reports coming forward. Not all of them result in genuine whistleblowing matters, and I think the term whistleblowing in itself, unfortunately, as we've discussed previously in this committee, can have a negative connotation rather than the positive one. We would want to encourage people to speak out and raise concerns, whether those are policy concerns or some of the other issues that are highlighted in Mairead's report to committee today. What is really encouraging, in my view, Chair, is the fact that we do operate an effective 3 lines of defence model. There is always room for improvement, but having members of staff and other people coming forward and raising concerns or formally whistleblowing is not something we would ever want to perceive to be negative. We would actually see that as an absolute positive, and in many ways is a barometer on whether or not the culture of the organisation is actually one in which people feel safe to speak up and raise issues. And with that in mind, Chair, my final comment was going to be, I am pleased to say that in the results of our 2025 employee survey for the whole of the council's workforce, we had received 68% positive response from our workforce saying that they felt encouraged and able to speak up and challenge issues, 9 percentage points higher than the benchmarking that is provided to us by Ipsos, the company that undertook that particular piece of work. And bearing in mind the response rate from the council's workforce overall was some 57%, we do know it's representative. I would also add, Chair, that perhaps to re-encourage members of this committee or reaffirm what I'm saying, that 68 percentage point score of people feeling comfortable speaking up and raising concerns is the whole council position. I am pleased to say that we get much higher ratings in different parts of the council, so there is variation. Lowest score in one part of the council for people feeling able to speak up is 62%. We have, by contrast, in other parts of the council, levels of safety and security and feeling well able to speak up at 78%. So, Chair, I am reassured we've made substantial progress in this area. And actually, I think what Mairead's report does is it pays credit to the work of internal audit and others in investigating, following up and ensuring that any raising of concern or whistleblowing is properly actioned and followed through. But equally, I think it's important to pay testament to the people that have chosen to raise those concerns in the first place. I would never want any employee or other individual thinking that raising concerns is something we would have a problem with. Quite the opposite. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed, Chief Executive, for that important statement. Any other comments about cybersecurity or whistleblowing? Ricky.
Thank you, Chair. In regards to whistleblowing, I noted in the internal audit, in regards to whistleblowing load, there was 41 referrals by the end of January. So I'd just like to ask officers, does that suggest sort of pressure? And I'm not saying I want to discourage people from whistleblowing. That's the complete opposite. But my real question is, do you feel we need any extra resource or higher triage criteria to support that want to grow the whistleblowing issue? Thank you.
Things like whistleblowing are always very difficult. If you have a very small number of cases forward, then presumably you're not actually encouraging the culture of making reports when reports should be made. If you have a very large number, that either shows you've got a good culture for reporting or you've got some serious problems. So it is a rather difficult balance to be had. But I think the first person to give some response to that should be Mairead.
Thank you. So yes, it's a high number of referrals compared to previous years. We have seen this trend of increased referrals over time, which I think is positive. The things to note about the whistleblowing is, not every case that is recorded on the log is either actionable or requires much investigation. Some cases are closed quite quickly. And even if we receive a whistleblowing, which is actually ultimately determined to be for another organisation, Cambridge City Council being the obvious one that we accidentally receive whistleblowings for, we will still log that we have received that and pass that on to the appropriate area. So not every whistleblowing is a lot of work. And then where whistleblowings do require further investigations, some of those will also then be investigated by other services. So we do that triage in terms of saying, actually, this belongs with health and safety, or this belongs with information governance or safeguarding, or whatever it is. So the audit team really would only take on cases that are sort of theft, fraud, corruption, and any kind of governance concerns that perhaps would naturally sit with an audit team to investigate. At the moment, as I've said, while we've had higher numbers of these cases coming in, we are seeing a steady closure rate. I don't want to jinx an audit team that's had a lot of recruitment struggles over the last few years, but currently we are staffed to a level where we've been able to manage the cases coming in. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Vicky.
No, thank you. I just wanted to say thank you, and that was actually clarified what my question actually entailed. I just wanted to clarify if you were comfortable that we're able to manage with the numbers. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. On the same subject, Anna, please.
On the subject of whistleblowing, yes. Thank you. Oh, it's disappeared from my screen. In the report, round about page 409, maybe a little bit, it's the last one before you get to the next section. There we are. Case 226, home care concerns. I just wanted to check on that because I can see in this case, perhaps the original issue raised was well, the case has been closed because it wasn't deemed to be, the person who raised the original whistleblowing concern didn't give any further information and didn't give any further detail. But what concerns me is that people who actually are in any kind of accommodation that we as a council use, and that might be adult supported living scenarios, it might be a care home for the elderly, it might be our children's homes. Any member of staff who raises an issue like that, they would potentially, if it was discovered that they were the person complaining or raising that as a concern, they would be potentially at the risk of either losing their job or either possibly even losing their home if it's a resident. And I just wondered, are we confident that that sort of query is being really carefully investigated? I mean, in this case, it's, and I'm sure there's more detail on this, I'm not asking for the detail, but if somebody raises a concern, the only reason for closing it down is for feeling that that was unfounded. And I just wonder whether if somebody's crying for help and so raises a concern in a rather new, undetailed way, are we actually investigating that whether there is a problem in that setting?
Thank you, Anna. Important question. I think it's important, first of all, from a culture point of view, that the Chief Executive gives a very direct answer to the point you've raised. And then I'll ask Mairead what her experience has been and if there is a danger of what Anna says potentially happening. Chief Executive.
Thank you, Chair. Without obviously talking about the specifics of the case, which I suspect Mairead might be able to touch on slightly further, I think it's really important to make the point, first of all, that people are protected in law when they raise whistleblowing allegations or issues or concerns. Public Interest Disclosure Act would absolutely apply and protect employees or indeed other people, and we would expect that in any care setting to be applicable as well. Care settings in the main are regulated by bodies like the Care Quality Commission or Ofsted in the case of children's services. Those bodies also provide direct routes for safe and prescribed whistleblowing to be addressed formally at a national and regulatory level. So we would also remind people that they are required to meet those standards as providers of care and to ensure that people actually feel safe and able to raise concerns. And that includes carers, not just indeed those in, not just service users or staff in settings. I think, Chair, the other point that's really important to make is through our commissioning service, where it's services that this authority is commissioning, irrespective of the age of the service user concerned, we have ongoing contract monitoring and management arrangements through the commissioning service. We have regular spot checks through the commissioning service. We obviously undertake safeguarding reviews on a regular and ongoing basis as well. So I would actually say, Chair, that we triangulate with the other regulators, we triangulate with other bodies, and where this council has any concerns about the quality, safety, or indeed security of provision, we would absolutely look into that in some depth, whether there's a formal allegation or detailed allegation or not. So in the case of this particular incident, I can't speak to the detail, and clearly we're not here to do that, but Mairead might want to talk about how that was handed over to other colleagues in commissioning to consider properly, because we would never just let this go, in my opinion. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chief Executive. Mairead, would you care to answer the question, possibly making, if you can, give slightly more information about the particular case, but the more general point raised by Anna, which is that there may be some reluctance of individuals to take to follow something through for fear of losing their job or for fear of losing maybe the place that they're living.
Thank you. Yeah, so I think that you know, part of the benefit of having our corporate whistleblowing route and the triage process that the audit team undertakes is that people do see that as a neutral and protected route for them to raise concerns if they're not comfortable doing that directly with their line managers or with, for example, you know, a setting that they're working in. They can and reasonably frequently do raise those through our corporate whistleblowing route. When that happens, we will review and triage the concern. In a case like this, we would then approach the relevant commissioning team. The commissioning team will review the concerns with us, discuss what are the most appropriate next steps to be taken, and they will obviously also be aware of any other intelligence that they may have about a particular setting or provider if concerns are being raised. Typically, that would then lead into an investigation by the commissioning service. And then audit will follow up with the service to say, okay, what are the outcomes of this concern being raised? So I think, and also it's important to note actually that when that happens, we would not share any identifying information regarding the whistleblower with the provider. And audit would work with commissioning as well to identify, you know, what could be identifying and where should the limit of informing them about the detail of any whistleblowing be. I should note as well that, you know, we do now report every single whistleblowing that comes into us through this report to this committee. Sometimes we receive reports, and it was the case with case 226 that you've highlighted, that are really so bland as to almost prohibit any substantial investigation. You know, we will get an email with a single line that says something like, you should look into provider X, there's terrible favoritism. And if we ask for further detail that would allow investigation, if we don't get more information, it's very difficult to investigate on that basis. But what does happen is that information is still fed through to our colleagues in commissioning, and they maintain a log of kind of concerns that have been raised about any provider. So that will still feed into the intelligence that they have on different providers if a concern has been raised, even if we're not able really to investigate that concern in any depth due to a lack of detail.
Thank you, Mairead. Anna?
That's fine. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. Does anyone have any other questions on any other part of Lewis?
Just to reiterate what was said by Mairead and the Chief Executive, whistleblowing, safeguarding is a matter of safeguarding. Really, safeguarding is it absolutely extends to protecting whistleblowers. Safeguarding is not only about protecting people in care; it's also about protecting those that care for them. So, at least from Adults Health, we have been reassured several times that we take that matter very, very seriously.
Thank you, Lewis. Any other comments on this or any other matter on this agenda item? Vicky.
Thank you, Chair. I attempted to ask a question. I believe it was in the wrong place last time on DSG. So in regards to that, the internal audit still shows the essential DSG safety valve recommendation as overdue. So what I'd like to ask is, when will smart targets and measurable delivery tracking be fully in place, please?
Thank you very much. Mary, do you want to answer it from an internal audit point of view, and then Chief Exec, you may care to elaborate?
Thank you. So from an internal audit point of view, we are very aware of this action and also of the some of the changes that have been announced to some extent recently and since this paper was drafted. My intention is that in the annual report, if this action is not closed down by that point, we will bring a detailed and focused summary with the internal audit perspective on where we are with this action, to provide the committee with sort of further detail than you're getting in our regular internal audit progress report updates. So this continues to progress, and we do liaise closely with the service around it. We are also, I should note, currently doing an audit of the SEND Inclusion for All programme, which is one of the key ways in which the service is looking to implement some of the actions that have come out of this audit. So it is an area where there's a considerable amount of work underway.
Thank you, Chief Executive.
Thank you, Chair, and grateful to Councillor Ioannidis for raising this matter again. I think part of the problem with this action has been both the requirement of the County Council to implement new systems, IT systems, to provide the data and reporting necessary to support the conclusion of the audit action. The implementation of that system is actually underway at present. However, I think there's a more fundamental problem that is worth acknowledging at this stage, and that's the fact the government has closed the safety valve programme from the 1st of April this year. Following the final local government financial settlement, we received a letter on the 9th of February from the Department for Education confirming that the safety valve programme will cease on the 1st of April. As part of that letter, the government have indicated that the new deficit grant that's been outlined effectively, as Michael mentioned earlier, writing off something like 90% of the deficit that has been accrued in upper tier authorities providing SEND services. We will actually be receiving a new deficit grant that will provide at least the same amount as the safety valve agreement would have done to this authority. But as Michael's rightly said, we await the detail of that with some interest. So at this stage, we have a slightly unusual situation, which is we have an overdue audit action. Work was in place from a council perspective, but of course some of that action was also subject to agreement from the government because it related to a direct agreement with the government, which the government has now cancelled. So we will have to find some way of bringing to members both the position from the council's control perspective and then what the consequences are once we understand the government's decision to close safety valve. I guess the other point to say, Chair, is whilst I'm encouraged that government has recognised the financial challenge that sits around the SEND system nationally, not just in this council, I think we've reflected previously that this isn't just about the money. This is about how we ensure better outcomes for children and young people through the SEND system, particularly in our case for children and young people in Cambridgeshire. Members may be aware that we have been awaiting a white paper from government on education reforms, which would include SEND reforms. Members may have seen that some of that appears to have been leaked in the media this morning. So we anticipate the white paper may be published during the course of next week after the half-term recess. Nonetheless, Chair, coming back to the specifics and the audit action that is overdue and outstanding here, I suspect the best answer will be a detailed update to say what actions has the Council been able to achieve by when, what will we continue to move forward with the implementation of the new system, and then in the right way of saying it to members, what are we going to have to close as a consequence of the government's decisions, which we are obviously just having to respond to rather than being able to negotiate on. I hope that's helpful, Chair.
Very much. Thank you, Chief Executive. Ricky.
No, I'd like to thank Stephen for an in-depth answer. That's fantastic. Thank you. And I agree. I'm sure all members would agree. We do need milestones that we need to be looking at. So yeah, that's great. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ricky. I have to say, from my perspective, having seen this item appear quarter after quarter, year after year almost, that it is astonishing how much work has been required in order to get from the position we were at to a position where one would have thought the fairly basic requirements of record keeping were being kept. And it's remarkable how much effort it has taken to get to where we are now. Absolutely remarkable. Any other comments from anyone on any subject to do with this agenda item? No, in which case I'll raise one of my favourites, and thank you, Anna, for raising it before as well. And that is that an increasing amount of time of officers of this council, particularly but not exclusively senior officers of this council, is being spent on local government reform and the preparations for it. To what extent should internal audit, and for that matter this committee, be looking at this in order to ensure that things are going according to plan? It's not our usual type of operation. It's not as though we're providing a service to anyone, but nevertheless, it's a really important amount of work which is being done by officers. And I don't think there is any part of the plan yet, unless it will be in the next month's meeting. I don't believe there's any part of the plan yet to oversee what is being done so far as internal audit and this committee is concerned.
Thank you, Chair. So in terms of the work that's been undertaken to date, with my risk management hat on, I have had involvement with the officer and member working groups that have worked on LGR, and therefore I can take some assurance with my head of internal audit hat on from the work that's been undertaken to date. The next meeting of this committee, we will be bringing the audit plan for 2026 to 27. That will include time for specific work on LGR. At the moment, that is likely to include some time for us to audit actions taken in preparation for LGR against a sort of checklist format that the MHCLG has published, recommending what actions councils should be taking at this point. And then also my intention is that we will allow a block of time that can be used within the course of the year for smaller pieces of audit work that it becomes apparent will be of benefit to the council in addressing LGR risks. So that could include things like specific reviews of contract availability and signatures. That could include things like doing a sort of quick deep dive exercise, looking at, are we confident around other record keeping areas that we should have in place for LGR, and providing assurance to the council on specific individual aspects of that LGR process. So that is the approach that I'm intending to take. I should say that I have also met with the other heads of audit across Cambridgeshire and Peterborough to discuss about this, and there is a general agreement that we will meet to discuss audit planning this year and share the audit plans across the board, and that looking forward to next year, we would be looking to ensure that as far as possible there is some alignment of audit plans, so that the new authorities, whatever form they may take, will have a sort of consistent level of assurance and understanding over some of those key systems that are being moved forward into new authorities. So it's certainly something that's high on the internal audit agenda. It's a very evolving risk, and that's why I think the appropriate approach is to take that sort of flexible approach of saying we will earmark some time for specific jobs at the start of the year, and some time to allow us to take on whatever jobs become apparent that need to be done over the course of the next year as well.
Thank you very much indeed for that, Mairead. You very briefly mentioned, almost as a casual aside, the MHCLG checklist. when that was produced and published again at the end of last year, I have to say I was shocked by the length of it. It's pages long, and it's not something which is going to be able to be gone through that quickly. And I'm just concerned that we appropriately focus the internal audit work on the areas of greatest risk, greatest vulnerability, and what needs to be reported back to members.
I certainly agree, and I think there are different ways that we can seek to obtain assurance over the checklist. So it may be that in some areas we would undertake some detailed testing, and that in other areas we would be simply contacting managers and saying, are you aware of this checklist, and can you give us an update on progress to get a sort of baseline level of assurance as well? So that would need to be targeted at the point of scoping out the audit itself.
Thank you, Maria. Chief Executive.
Chair, I'm delighted you've mentioned the MHCLG checklists for local government reorganisation, which are extensive. Regrettably, they are the MHCLG checklists for local government reorganisation with the understanding that civil servants have of what is required. So I am afraid to have to tell members that I expect there will be an awful lot more required than even MHCLG's guidance suggests. So I think, as in the nicest way of saying it, that's probably the bare minimum. Probably not even that in reality, given the level of operational detail that will be required across the 7 local authorities in this area. Yes, I think the MHCLG checklists are helpful insofar as they go. Thank you, Chair.
Vicky.
Thank you, Chair. The issue with key systems, I believe, and the risk exposures in regards to that was mentioned. So it prompted a question from me. Do we have any overdue actions that relate to payroll and payroll key systems and their risk exposure? And do we have any known losses in regard, so such as overpayments or fraud or errors?
All right.
Thank you. So within Annex B, there are, off the top of my head, I can confirm there are some outstanding actions in relation to key systems. Those would be within the finance and resources numbers within Table 8. So they would not exceed the total number of actions due within the Finance and Resources Directorate, but I couldn't tell you exactly how many linked to key systems. They are not typically related to actual overpayments or actual fraud or error that we are aware of. They are about making amendments to systems to reduce the risk of future possible fraud or possible error within those systems. And they continue to be followed up by my teams on an ongoing basis and reported back to this committee.
Thank you, Mairead. Vicky.
Thank you. So as far as we know, we've got no known losses.
Mairead.
No known losses identified by audit in relation to those actions. Yes, I can confirm that. Beyond that, I wouldn't be able to comment, but Michael, maybe.
Thank you. Michael.
Chair, thank you. And yes, as Mairead points out from page 421, there are a number of other recommendations, not just over the payroll, but debt, accounts receivable, and other areas you would expect. In fact, I have never known it to be a situation where we have not got recommendations around key financial systems. What that gives us is a level of assurance. None of us could ever give assurances that there are no losses or no frauds being perpetrated in any system, in any organisation. What this shows is that we have strong controls across the environment. There are clearly some medium rated actions that we need to address, and we are taking those up with the appropriate managers, even where they are shared services arrangements, as well as within my directorate. But I couldn't give you 100% assurance because that would be impossible in the scale of a billion point two organisation.
Thank you, Michael. Vicky.
Thank you. I appreciate the answers. But my concern is that where we've got overdue actions still outstanding in regards to these systems, etc., with the risk exposure that's laid out. And I appreciate, we're never going to get 100% assurance, but it doesn't fill me with much confidence that we have some assurance. I mean, what testing do we do that supports that we're moving in the right direction on that? Thank you.
All right.
Thank you. So this is the annual suite of key financial systems reviews that we do. So in section 10 of the report, we touch on some of those. So typically in any year, we would cover testing of accounts receivable, accounts payable, debt, payroll, and then we also audit the pension fund to provide assurance over that. This year, we've also been looking at general ledger with the draft report just released and bank reconciliation, which will be coming up shortly. We also will do reviews of specific systems where that becomes relevant in another audit. So typically, I would say there's quite a high level of review and assurance over those different systems. And where there are outstanding actions, we follow up through our normal follow-ups process, but importantly, actions aren't closed until we have seen evidence of the implementation of that action. So we will be going back to check that there is evidence that whatever control improvement has been agreed and recommended, that is implemented before the action is closed. So there's that kind of continuous follow-up in that sense as well.
Thank you, Mairead. Ricky.
Thank you. That's a little bit more reassuring. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from anyone? Lewis.
Yeah, it's a suggestion, if that is possible. Could we have a trajectory chart of the outstanding audit actions, highlighting overdue or of actions over 12 months? The ones you provide in the report are a snapshot rather than a trend. I just ran my own before the meeting, and it's very telling when you can see by directorate over the last 6 quarters those actions that have been triggered, those that are due, overdue, over 12 months, and it shows trends rather than a snapshot. I found that very useful before going through each individually.
Thank you, Mairead.
Thank you. So that's what we've tried to introduce with Table 8 in terms of the breakdown of actions that are kind of coming in and going out since the previous report, to give more of a sense of what is the current trend, and also to recognise that actually sometimes the closure of actions is somewhat eclipsed by new actions that have become due in the same period. And then Table 7 is intended to present actions overdue over time across the different categories so that you can see how many are becoming sort of more aged. I'm very happy to take any other suggestions for formats if there's a format that the committee would like that they want to share with me. Happy to have discussions around that.
Thank you, Mairead. Lewis?
Yes, no, I found those very helpful as they are. It's I'll probably just share with you what I did, and that might be helpful as well.
Thank you, Lewis. Ricky.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I would like to make a suggestion. Well, what I would like to see is a sort of clear directorate by directorate clearance plan for the outstanding deadlines, and an escalation route where overdue recommendations, they're not just sort of noted, but they're enforced. Because, I mean, internal audits are one of the few systems that's designed to protect taxpayers from waste and failure. But the value of internal audits is basically destroyed if recommendations sit overdue for months and years. So, you know, especially in finance, payroll, procurement, and DSG. So that's something I would like to see. If that's something we could get, it would be much appreciated.
Thank you, Ricky. I will point out that part of that function actually falls to this committee. And if we find, and we have done on 3 occasions in the last few years, if we find that there has been undue delay in remedying internal audit weaknesses which have been identified, then we have the power, and we have used that power, to refer the matter back to the service committee for them to give further consideration to, because quite clearly it's something which had not been addressed as expeditiously as we would have expected. So we do have some power in that. And Mairead, I wonder if there is if you could give some consideration to any way in which the request which has been made by Ricky would be able to be actioned, so that we could see some summary on directorate level.
Thank you. I think the intent of Annex B is certainly that it is flagging actions for this committee's consideration as to whether any need to be escalated further. That does function as a direct, well, not per directorate, but per action, sorted less on a directorate basis and more on the basis of how overdue are they and how high priority are they. But that is intended to function as a clearance plan, because we are requesting management give clear reasoning for why an action hasn't been implemented to date, and a target implementation date for when they do believe it will be implemented. So I would really encourage this committee to use Annex B as the basis for that. And then, you know, in the body of the internal audit progress report, where I am flagging, you know, particular individual actions, perhaps that have become very aged, or as we discussed earlier, the essential recommendation that's overdue, that is being flagged again for the attention of this committee and for your consideration as to whether that is something that you would wish to escalate. And similarly, the same information will also go to CLT. So that is the route by which these actions are escalated, firstly to senior management to ensure they are aware of outstanding actions, and then secondly, to this committee as well.
Thank you. And I can confirm, Vicky, that when a particular directorate is responsible for a number of actions which are overdue and become seriously overdue, it becomes awfully obvious in this report, and we have utilised that in the past to be able to target the actions of this committee. Before coming back to you, Vicky, may I just ask the Chief Executive to make a further comment?
Thank you, Chair, and absolutely agree with the point made about this committee's role and, where necessary, referring matters back to service and policy committees for further consideration. The other point I would make to you, and linking to a later item on your agenda today, is the fact that you receive assurance reports throughout the course of the year from the individual executive directors. That's a chance for Audit and Accounts Committee to scrutinise the directorate's performance in terms of delivering their audit actions that they've agreed, and also inquiring about systems to ensure that audit actions are delivered on time or escalated where there are issues. So I think it's also just to remind you that those assurance statements, and as we've developed that approach, are to provide that additional layer and opportunity for member scrutiny in terms of not just audit matters, but assurance in the round across each of the directorates. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chief Executive. Vicky.
Thank you, Chair. No, that actually clarifies what I was looking for. I just thought it would be a little bit more helpful for members if they can see it sort of in a graph or a table in some way, where we have the deadlines there, we have the escalation routes where appropriate noted there, so we can actually monitor it as it progresses, rather than sort of leaving it till we get assurance reports and to the last minute, say, where it becomes visibly obvious that we need to address the matter. So I just thought that'd be a little bit more helpful for members. I'm not sure if those would agree, but it was just my view on it. Thank you.
Very helpful contribution. Thank you, Vicky. And I'm sure that Mairead will take that on board and give consideration to how we could manage to potentially address that issue. But I can say from experience, when a particular directorate is the source of a number of problems, it has stood out very, very clearly indeed. And it's not merely stood out very clearly for this committee, but also for CMT, who have taken appropriate action where necessary. Right, any other, oh, sorry, Vicky. Right, any other comments from anyone about this report? Just moving to the recommendations then, we're just being asked to note and comment on the content of the report. We have noted and commented on it. Thank you very much indeed, Mairead, for the report itself and for answering the questions. If I may ask the Chief Executive, would you be kind enough to forward the MHCLG checklist to the leader of the council so she can see at the minimum requirement just what is being suggested is going to be required for local government reorganisation, because I imagine that she will be as horrified as I was to see the length of the list of what MHCLG requires. Right.
Chair, thank you. Very happy to do that. If any other members are equally inclined to see the delights of that particular checklist, I will be very happy to share it with them. I think the leader may actually have seen it already, but I'm happy to resend it to her. Thank you.
And I see Councillor Wilson nodding his head, so I think Councillor Wilson may be interested as well. If any other member is interested, please ask the Chief Exec and you'll be happy to, or ask Democratic Services, yes. Right, so we can move on to agenda item 6, the Executive Director's Assurance Report for Place and Sustainability. As members will be aware, the report author Frank Jordan leaves the council this week to take up the role of Executive Director of City Operations at Birmingham City Council, which is Europe's largest local authority now, and we wish him every success in that role. Lee Harris has been appointed as Interim Executive Director for Place and Sustainability while the process to appoint Frank's permanent successor takes place. As Lee's only just joined us, today's report will be presented by Emma Fitch, the Service Director for Environment, Planning and Economy, and Emma is joined today by Nicola Young, the Head of Complex Infrastructure, and by Jenny Croft, the Head of Assurance and Strategic Performance. Emma, Nicola, Jenny, would you care to introduce the report, please?
Thank you, Chair. So as you'll be aware, this report, starting on page 467 of your pack, has been written by Frank Jordan to provide assurance around the governance and control environment for the Place and Sustainability Directorate. As Frank is not able to present this to today's committee, I'll be providing assurance today on his behalf. So following a similar format to how Frank presented this to committee last year, I'll pull out and draw on the specific areas of the report I'd like to highlight. So section 2 of the report highlights the functions and the key responsibilities for Place and Sustainability up to December 2025 to give an overview of what is covered across the Directorate. Outside of this period, members will have probably noted that it highlights that from the 1st of January 2026, community development and resilience functions, which includes libraries, communities, archives, domestic abuse services, skills and emergency planning, also joined the Directorate from Strategy and Partnerships, and they were reported on as part of the Executive Director for Strategy and Partnerships Assurance Report in July 2025. Furthermore, the report acknowledges that regulatory services is a shared service with Peterborough until the 1st of April 2026, covering registration, coroners and trading standards, with trading standards returning to this council's management from April 2026. Section 3 of the report highlights the assurance statement with the key risks and major governance issues for the Directorate being identified as the Cambridge Guided Busway and the Waste PFI Review. This report effectively provides updates on both. Section 4 sets out the existing control environment, which includes reference to monthly review meetings held that cover finance, performance, risk and change using a balanced scorecard approach that I saw was presented by Frank in last year's Audit and Accounts Committee that took place on the 27th of March 2025, which I'm aware some members here today were in part of. In terms of the Waste PFI review, members will be aware that the Directorate has reviewed the Waste PFI arrangements because facilities built under the contract cannot be used owing to environmental and emissions compliance issues. A preferred solution has been developed, and that was reported to Strategy, Resources and Performance Committee on Thursday, the 29th of January 2026. Members will also be aware that in relation to the Cambridgeshire Guided Busway, a number of strengthened governance, safety and operational measures have been implemented, including weekly and fortnightly assurance meetings led by the Executive Director and Statutory Officers, comprehensive risk assessment programme with independent verification, safety improvements, including fencing, speed controls during works, crossing points, lighting and signage, increased enforcement activity, improved maintenance arrangements and public and stakeholder engagement. Monthly review outputs feed into corporate level reporting at the Corporate Leadership Team, CLT and Change Board, and the Directorate also provides quarterly reporting to policy committees. Notwithstanding these assurances, page 483 to 494 of your pack sets a framework where there is good assurance in some areas, but it does also highlight some further work to be carried out in 2026 to 27 that still needs to be done to improve the assurance environment further as a Directorate. Overall control is good and effective, and Frank has put measures in place to ensure the performance management regime, risk regime and financial controls are covered in monthly meetings. He has also managed to change and has reported these through the relevant service and policy committees. In particular, I'd highlight the 7 areas showing generally well-established and functioning insurance areas set out on between those pages 483 to 494 of your pack, namely risk management, emergency and business continuity planning, management of change, performance management, financial management, governance of council control companies, and information governance. However, as I've already stated, you will have seen through pages 483 to 494, there are still some areas that need some further work to provide that insurance. Examples include internal audit actions. 6 actions remain outstanding and further work is needed to ensure implementation. Decision making, we need to test and ensure all officer decisions are recorded and filed and committee decision action plans are produced where required. Procurement and contract management, further reviews are needed to confirm registers are complete and the use of waivers and off-contract spend requires further scrutiny. Complaints and local government ombudsman processes, and there's a need for more robust systems to log, track and ensure timely complaint responses across all services. Audit actions are set out in section 5 and also Annex B on page 495 of the report shows progress as highlighted in section 6 and has already identified the Directorate has 6 audit actions remaining open at the time the report was written. And we're also aware, as the Chair kindly referenced at the start of the meeting, there is a public question that will be replied to in writing after this meeting. I can therefore provide you with assurance on Frank's behalf for the P&S Directorate and have highlighted areas for further work and improvements. However, I'm happy to try and take and answer any questions that may arise with the help of Nicola Young and Jenny Croft. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed. Any other comments from officers before we move to questions and comments? Questions and comments, I think, Graham, I thought I saw your hand go up. Graham.
Thank you for that.
My apologies for interrupting you. It is important for all members to realise we are not the service committee. We've not got responsibility for the actions which are taken. Our job here is to look at the assurance processes which are in place in the Directorate to ensure that they are robust and appropriate. So I just wanted to emphasise that. My apologies for interrupting, Graham, but it's a distinction which is really quite important. Graham.
Okay, and you correct me, Chris, if I ask a question which is inappropriate for this committee. But I think on page 495, you acknowledged that there was more work needed to be undertaken to meet internal audit recommendations. The revised target date for those is coming up very quickly. Can you confirm to us that those dates will be met and that we won't be looking for further extensions? Thank you.
Thank you. And I believe that those dates were the 31st of March, weren't they, if I remember correctly?
31st of March for a couple, and one of them about highways grant briefing is the 28th of February, which is even sooner.
Thank you very much indeed. Officers?
So thank you, and thank you for Chair for making the distinction around assurance. I'm also mindful that Mairead is in the room, so I'm sure if there's any further follow-up, she'll be able to assist. Effectively, particularly with the highways, ones that are open at the moment, there's a lot of work and a lot of assurance that's going on in the Directorate to make sure that we are delivering on what we are required to do for those audit actions. I'm aware that a briefing note has been given on one of those actions to internal audit, and there's a lot of cross-working to make sure that we're aware of the requirements to close some of those functions down. As you will have seen, some of the audit requirements have already been closed. As part of our Directorate management team, we have monthly assurance meetings, and as part of that, we're looking at those open audit actions. We're also now meeting directly with audit colleagues, which wasn't necessarily happening in the past, so we can make sure that the full background and the full complexities are gone through, but also to make sure that there is an understanding that where requirements are either needed to go back to a service committee, or further work is required, that can be worked through. And I think, as Mairead alluded to earlier, that will then allow for the annual report to then state if there isn't, that there's a full assurance brought back to this committee.
Graham.
I'm not sure whether that was a yes or no or a maybe. I think it was we're talking to internal audit, but they will require an extension. Is that what you're saying? And if that's the case, I don't think that's really what we wanted to hear from an audit and accounts committee point of view.
Apologies, I should have been more precise. So what I would say is I cannot 100% guarantee that those dates will be met. However, as part of the discussions with audit, we're working through to make sure that they are, as Councillor Ioannidis said, are specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and have that timescale, so they are smart. But I don't know whether there is anything further that I can add at this stage without the detail. But certainly the assurance is there, and I know that Frank has done an awful lot to close down, as you would have seen, as many actions as we possibly can.
Thank you very much indeed. Any other questions on this particular topic?
I'd be interested in Mairead's point of view on this and the extent to which you feel comfortable with the answers that are being given to us. I've for one, are not very comfortable. I feel that this is something that has been going on for too long, and we should have been sorting it out by now.
Right.
Thank you. So we have, I mean, there are the 6 actions which are in the appendix are quite varied, and each of them is different. I would say, glancing through them, that I feel reasonably familiar with each of the actions, which is a good sign that that we are kind of getting those updates. In terms of, when will things be closed down? I think the first action around capital project management, actually we've seen it was a very extensive action, and the service has been steadily working to close down elements of that action over time. There are other actions where perhaps we haven't seen the same level of progress, so things like the highways reconciliation action. I'm not sure we've seen the same level of progress with getting that closed. And other actions where perhaps there have been sort of technical barriers at times to implementing a solution. So thinking of some of the sort of time recording and cost allocation actions. So hard to give a single comment that really encompasses a range of different actions. But I would say that, we do always continue to work with the service and to try to identify any areas where either, perhaps we can manage the risk in a different way if the action that was originally proposed isn't appropriate, and still obtain that assurance that risk is being managed. Or alternatively, if the council needs to accept the risk, that is a conversation that we also have with services to say, if it is not possible to manage this, do we need to flag to the committee that this is a risk which effectively we are accepting as a council, and do we need to have that conversation about, are we content with that? So I hope that goes some way to answering the question.
Thank you, Mairead. Graham. Okay, you've made your point, and I think it's been well made. Anna.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to take our attention to page 498, where we're looking at medium recommendations overdue for over 3 months, and it's the street lighting PFI. And the narrative there says that the County Council should request that Balfour Beatty provide evidence each year that the customer satisfaction survey was sent to 500 people, alongside providing the survey results, which is laudable. But my question is, are we as an audit body confident that sending the customer satisfaction survey to 500 customers is sufficient, given the number of locations that this contract is affecting? Some of our villages have 5,000 residents, just one village. So I'm just wondering, how do they choose that 500, and is it representative? And are we confident that is giving the audit committee a sufficiently robust set of data about whether people are satisfied with the street lighting replacement?
Thank you. No, thank you very much indeed, Anna. Emma.
Thank you for the question. I think just to note, with regards to the customer satisfaction survey, the audit log notes that that will be formally transferred to an in-house survey. I don't have the details on the number of residents that will be included within that, but moving that in-house would give us more scope to ask that survey to a wider range of residents. But I can take that away and check what the revised number would be.
Thank you, Anna.
Thank you. The reason I ask is because this is local to me. The village I live in was one of the first that this new arrangement was rolled out in, and there was a considerable amount of disquiet at the reduced levels of lighting that resulted from the change. And whilst we recognised that the purpose was to save money and we didn't need to light areas that didn't need to be lit or indeed pay for that, what people have been concerned about is given that immediately prior to that we had a whole series of streetlights taken out, and so that meant that in addition to those streetlights having been removed, when the light levels were lowered with the LED replacements, that resulted in some really quite dark pools throughout our village. And I'm sure it's happened elsewhere as well. Now, we have actually managed to get some of those street lamps that were taken out previously.
My apologies for interrupting. Can we keep to the assurance? Please?
Absolutely. So the question in my mind is, and I reiterate it, is this method of assurance and monitoring going to be sufficient to identify whether customers are actually satisfied in the villages that it's impacted?
Thank you, Anna.
So I don't think we have the detail, Anna, but what I would suggest is that, and Mairead will probably come in if I'm wrong, but I'm guessing that the contract that was taken out at the time of the street lighting PFI would have had that requirement in it. But what the assurance that Audit weren't able to get was that it was actually being undertaken. So I'm not saying that it isn't different to that, and we can certainly take it away, but I'm guessing that when it was, to be able to provide evidence that it was sent to those 500 people, it would have linked to the contract and been a requirement within it. But we can certainly take that away and double check that.
Thank you very much, Chief Executive.
Thank you, Chair. I think Emma's actually given the answer I was probably about to say. So I think there's two things that need to happen. One is we need to correctly check what the provisions of the street lighting PFI are contractually in terms of customer surveying. And then secondly, given that there's an intention to bring this work in-house according to the update provided, we need to understand the costs of that and whether or not that decision has actually been taken. And third, we will provide members of this committee with a briefing note to clarify the questions you've raised, including is the sampling size sufficient, correct and demographically representative, so we can follow up on those points. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chief Executive. Any other comments from Anna? No. Any other comments?
That's fine. I'm satisfied with those answers. Thank you.
Thank you. Vicky.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm sure members would agree there are some concerning issues that's in the report, such as the guided busway breaches, the waste PFI, and also the health and safety, I believe, fine, £6 million fine. In terms of the report, it's useful because what it does is it admits some uncomfortable truth, procurement breaches, etc., as just explained. So my view is that assurance only means something if it's measurable. So what I would like to see is clear root cause and accountability outcomes for the procurement breaches as such, measurable KPIs, I think was mentioned when delivering the report details for the guided busway, the health and safety framework, and a dated plan. These things should be dated so we can clearly see a plan, to stop any maybe upcoming waste PFI costs, from risks of rolling over, etc. So I do appreciate the work that goes into these reports. So please don't take this as personally or a criticism. It's just my I suppose constructive criticism, really, what I'd like to see, because without those that I've mentioned, these assurances is just a narrative as far as I'm concerned.
Thank you. Emma?
Yes, thank you. If I take the waste PFI as an example, we do actually have in the report that was taken to Strategy, Resources and Performance Committee, there is a time scale and a time frame, albeit that is subject to a number of different stages. So what you'll find in this session is that we can't provide you that detail just through the confidentiality elements, but those do exist. So it's just really give you that assurance that those do exist. And there is also a similar time frame, particularly around some of the safety works on the busway as well. So they are in place. It's just for different reasons they aren't necessarily able to be provided in the report, but we can definitely give you that assurance.
Matt, the Chief Executive first, and then come back to you, Ricky.
Thank you, Chair. Just to supplement what Emma said, and just to be really clear, there are 3 service and policy committees that provide and receive assurance on those separate line items. As you've already heard today, the Assets and Procurement Committee oversees all matters to do with procurement, including waiver reporting and the KPIs that are measured through the dashboard that committee receives. That's also part of the overall council dashboard that is provided quarterly to the Strategy, Resources and Performance Committee. On the guided busway, matters are reported properly for public scrutiny through the Highways and Transport Committee, and there are detailed operational plans and timescales and deliverables, including contractual requirements around the safety implementation of the fencing, signage and lighting along the totality of the busway. And thirdly, as Emma's already said, there have been and continue to be very detailed plans around the waste PFI, which rightly, because of commercial sensitivity, have been dealt with in private session by the Strategy, Resources and Performance Committee. All of those items have recent and indeed ongoing reporting to committee. Further to that, I would also advise members that in the case of the waste PFI and guided busway specifically, you will be aware of the Section 25 report from the Council's Section 151 officer that outlines some of those matters as part of the business plan and budget setting process. The risk registers adequately reflect on those as well. And today, in the audit opinion from KPMG, you've also had some commentary in respect of both of those items relating to the statement of accounts, as well as the waiver item, I believe. So I just wanted to reassure members that these are subject to proper member governance scrutiny and oversight, but actually below that, very detailed operational plans, key performance indicators, and clear timescales that are measured and monitored. For example, in the case of the guided busway, I and the other 2 statutory officers meet fortnightly with the Executive Director of Place and Sustainability and Service Director for Transport and Connectivity to scrutinise and assure ourselves that the guided busway improvements are being delivered on time, on budget, and to meet the requirements from the Health and Safety Executive. I hope that's helpful, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed. Ricky.
Thank you. That was actually very helpful, and I do appreciate the these are scrutinised through other committees in detail, but this. What I wanted to say this from an audits and accounts perspective, we sit, not all members sit on them other committees. We sit on this committee. So that's something I would like to see in this committee, because it just gives us that reassurance. It doesn't have to be in full detail, but just maybe short description, short reassurance that these things are being kept on top of, and the KPIs are being met. We are delivering these things, not going over cost, etc. So that was my point on the matter. But again, I do appreciate that this work is being done in other committees. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Ricky. Any other comments from anyone? A couple from me then, if I may. The risk registers themselves and the risk matrices which are supplied to us are always interesting reading. Risk matrices in particular being very visual and can lead to some very useful questions being asked. And I'm pleased that we have clearly now moved away from the idea of targets to the idea of appetite. And I think that's a really important point, because it not merely states what we are trying to do, but it defines what our limitations are of what we would accept, given that we can't achieve everything that we want to achieve, and therefore we have to have limitations as to how far we would allow something to go in a particular circumstance. But it is always important that that the likelihood and consequence of the relevant risks are realistic. And sometimes things are produced here which are a little bit counterintuitive. I'll take I think it's the first one we've got, the first risk matrix that we've got, which is on adverse weather, where we're told that our current score is 15 and our risk appetite is 15, all well and good. All of these things are very broad brush, of course, in that you have to divide the likelihood and the consequence into one of 5 categories. But it strikes me as strange that if we're talking about adverse weather, whilst we can have control over the consequences, we can't have control over the weather itself. Yet we are saying that our appetite is lower than the likelihood of adverse weather. And it just seems to me that in terms of useful decision making based on the risk registers and risk matrices, to have a risk appetite for something which is lower than something which we can't control is potentially unrealistic. Have I misunderstood the way in which you use your risk register and your risk matrices?
I think I'll take that one away if that's okay, just to be able to double check, because not 100% sure, I think, is the answer to that. Is that okay, Chair, to take that away and come back to you in the committee?
Be very happy if a response could be given to Democratic Services, to be given to all members of the committee, so that we can understand the way in which you utilise the risk registers and the risk matrices. But I accept also that what we're presented with here is virtually the tip of a pyramid of internal controls which exist, and I fully appreciate that we can't be given that, and it's actually not appropriate for us to be given that in this committee. We merely need to be confident that there is a system of assurance in place which is working. Nevertheless, I look at these and think, well, how do some individual problems, which we're aware of in our capacity as local members, how do these tie in with the assurances which are being provided to us? And I'll give a particular example, and I'm doing so because a member of the public from Ely wrote to me week before last asking a particular question, and I think it's worth my raising it with you, not for you to give a specific answer to it, but to explain how it fits in with the assurance process that you've got here. And his question, which is one which I've heard from many others as well, but he asked it to me specifically from the point of view of audit and accounts, is just how do we have any degree of confidence that the work which is done on, for example, fixing potholes is actually cost effective, or it's just patching up and has to be done again and again and again. And I'm not asking for an answer on that question. I'm asking how, within the frame of assurance which you've provided to us, how is something like that, how does it fit in?
So in terms of how we hold the contractors to account, that's obviously part of our contract agreement. We inspect the quality of works. We hold the contractor to account to ensure that works are delivered to the appropriate standard and rectified without cost to the council. This is set out in our contract, where we're required to, or the contractor is required to correct quality issues within 28 days at their expense, and there's a separate mechanism for works over £500,000. So through our commercial and contracts team, we'll be monitoring the inspection and how we hold contractors to account.
Chief Exec.
Thank you, Chair. And just to supplement that and refer you back to your earlier report from Mairead, if I may, internal audit currently have work underway on the highways contract, which will further address those points, because of course it's not just the role of the service in terms of client and contract management to achieve value for money, it's the independent opinion from internal audit on whether or not that's being discharged that we want to receive as well. Thank you.
I'm extremely grateful for that comment. Thank you, Chief Executive. But it does come back to the question I was asking, which wasn't actually about potholes. It was about how do everyday management matters, which, and you explained the managerial process of this, but how do they fit in to the assurance framework and the assurances which you have provided, or which the department has provided to us?
Chair, if I may step in.
Yes, Chief Executive.
I think recognising officers are here on behalf of an executive director who is currently, I think, in the Cotswolds before he takes up his new job on annual leave. I would suggest that it's probably something we take away and pick up with the interim executive director and provide you with a further written response on that point, because I think it's probably somewhat unfair to ask the officers in attendance today to be able to answer what might have been in the mind of the former executive director. Thank you.
I'm very grateful for that suggestion, and I hope that that our executive director is enjoying a pothole-free time in the Cotswolds. And this is a matter of process and of the understanding of what assurance is. And I think it's entirely appropriate that the successor to the existing executive director is the person who lets us know that answer, not just me, but all the members of this committee, so that we can understand what his understanding is of the assurances which are provided to us through this whole process. So I think that's a quite appropriate thing to do. Thank you very much indeed for the suggestion. Are there any other questions? Lewis.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'll go back to Bosway, and just because of the severity, not only of the penalty, but also of the consequences of that sentencing, that sentence. I appreciate the CEO comments on the management oversight and how constantly we are checking on the progress. However, I would like to have formalized assurance, safety assurance for this committee in the way of a post-sentencing audit, something that where we can show that we have had the external audit, the periodical checks, and yeah, that we have complied with every single step of what is required after that sentencing. I think that safety assurance will probably go a long way. In case that something happens, we will have shown legally that we have done everything possible in that regard.
Thank you, Lewis. Rather serious implications on this one. Chief Executive.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's really important for members to understand that whilst the sentencing and prosecution, well, not the sentencing, the verdict passed down by the court following the Council's decision to plead guilty to historical failures on the guided busway in terms of health and safety matters is something we've taken exceptionally seriously, not just because of the court case, but in the run-up to that and subsequently. Members of the Highways and Transport Committee have been privy to a range of reports and continue to receive reports outlining the work to improve the safety on the guided busway. And actually, one of the things that the Highways and Transport Committee was asked to make a decision on at its very first meeting following the elections last year in June was substantial investment in safety fencing, lighting improvements and signage, which members unanimously approved. As part of those reports on progress with the safety works for the guided busway, I can refer members to the fact that a full safety assurance regime is in place. There is a dedicated health and safety team that works only on the busway. There is an independent health and safety expert commissioned by the Council auditing our risk assessments and providing fully external qualified assurance to us. We have engaged a separate counsel to support us on matters relating to the busway to ensure that further issues are properly advised on and aren't using the same legal advisors, so that we've got different perspective and make sure we're being challenged. But really importantly, Chair, I think the point I would make on busway assurance is the Health and Safety Executive continue to undertake preventative and proactive management inspections of the busway working with the county council. So it's not just about the assurance that we can give you as officers, and frankly that the work is on track. Indeed, in the southern section fencing, from memory, we're actually ahead of schedule, which is very positive in terms of being able to move forward. And of course, we're communicating progress on an ongoing basis to the public, as well as engaging directly with communities. But I think the really key point is to recognise the regulator continues to take an active interest and talks to us on an ongoing basis, and will point to things that they think we need to do if we haven't already taken those actions. So, Chair, I think what I would say is we are very happy to refer members of this committee to the relevant reports, the links to the assurance frameworks and action that is already in place and signed off. But I would also just advise you that this isn't just a matter within the gift of the council. We are taking independent assurance ourselves, and the regulator continues to take an active interest, quite rightly, in these matters, given the tragic circumstances that happened between 2011 and 2021. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Bruce.
Thank you very much. That is very reassuring. Thank you.
I think it's very important again to emphasise our function isn't to act as the service committee or proxy for the service committee. Our function is to ensure that we are satisfied that there is a system of assurance in place and that that system of assurance is actually working. And I take it, Chief Executive, that if anyone has any concerns about that from this committee, they can contact you directly to receive more detailed information on any particular part of the Council's operations.
Absolutely, Chair. It'd be my pleasure to provide further advice. Thank you.
Thank you. Anna.
Thank you. On that matter, you will appreciate that there are a number of guided busways in addition to the current one in the pipeline. And I just wanted to be reassured, given that the one that's going to be close to me, Waterbeach to Cambridge, which is of a different design than the current guided busway, will some of the health and safety assurances and monitoring that is making the current guided busway safer, will that be all applied as far as it can be to the new designs, or rather the designs for the new guided busways?
Thank you. Again, without going into too much operational detail, what do we have within our systems of assurance which actually will meet the very obvious point that Anna is making, which really, I know these things should go without saying, but they don't go without saying. They actually have to go through a process. Emma.
Thank you, Chair. So I think the main thing to say was that Frank Jordan has, in the development of the new GCP schemes that are coming forward that you're referring to, are definitely taking the lessons learned from the guided busway, and we're ensuring that that information is fed into the new designs. Wider than just the busway, in fairness, it goes into much wider matters. So that assurance I can give you that has been picked up and is coming in, but I'm sure the Chief Executive will want to build on that.
Chief Executive.
Chair, mindful that this is forward-looking rather than retrospective assurance that we're discussing, I think the key point for Councillor Bradnam is to be able to say that the learnings from the guided busway that currently operates are being shared with the Greater Cambridge Partnership. Of course, at this stage, we're talking about Transport and Works Act orders and the determination of the Secretary of State for Transport. So as yet, we don't know if they are going ahead. We await government's decision on those matters. Equally importantly, it would be prudent of us to continue to work with other guided busways across the country, and we are doing that to share best practice, and we will continue to do so. So what I can say is, yes, the learnings are being shared with the Greater Cambridge Partnership, but we can't presume that guided busways will be approved by the Secretary of State at this stage. But it is important that we try to adopt a safe by design approach should that be the case. And then secondly, and I think the distinction that's really important for members to understand, the Greater Cambridge Partnership obviously is a partnership not just of this authority but two others in the university. We just happen to host it and receive the money directly from government as the accountable body. However, as the Highways Authority and ultimately the delivery and statutory agency for busways operating in the county, we have taken the responsibility away from the Greater Cambridge Partnership of busway operations and programme management, and have instead put that back into the Transport and Connectivity Service of this council. So the direct control, assurance and risk management of any future busway delivery we would be entirely within the control of the County Council as the Highways Authority. Thank you, Chair.
That's very much appreciated. Thank you. Any other comments anyone would like to make on this report? No, well, it just remains for me to thank Emma, Nicola and Jenny for standing in for Frank Jordan. Sorry if some of the questions were difficult ones, but that's, to be quite honest, what we're here for. And it's vitally important that the system of assurance which exists operates effectively, so that we can be confident that it's not necessary for us to look at the detail of what's going on. We can leave all the detail to the Service Committee itself. So we'll move to the report recommendations. We're just being asked to consider the assurance provided over the adequacy of the Council's control environment and compliance. Oh, sorry. Graham.
Sorry, Chris, when you get to the recommendations, I was going to add a recommendation that if the service officers are unable to meet the internal audit dates, then the high recommendations, which are overdue by over 12 months, should go to the relevant service committee meeting so that they are aware of the issues, as we have referred to in the past at other committees.
Given that we're talking about over 12 months, I don't think that that is an unreasonable suggestion to make, if Democratic Services is happy with that suggestion. Certainly. Well, we do have the constitutional right to do, in fact, if not the duty, to do what is being suggested by Councillor Wilson. So I'd be perfectly happy to waive the normal notice in that circumstance. Did you want to say something, Ricky?
Thank you, Chair. I would just like to say that I would second that also. Thank you.
Very much indeed. So we have a proposer, a seconder. Comments from anyone? Oh, Anna. Oh, no. Okay. Those in favour, please show.
Just agree.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Bradham, you do wish to speak, do you?
No, I wanted to agree.
Those in favour, please show.
That's unanimous, Chair.
That this now be referred back to the relevant service committee. So thank you for all of that.
If they don't,
if they don't meet the deadlines which have been set,
yes,
or target dates. Right. Agenda item 7 is the committee agenda plan. Does anyone have any comments or questions about the agenda plan? No, in which case we will accept. Ricky.
Sorry, Chair, it's very quick. So I do support the agenda plan, but my priority would be locking in some, reoccurring scrutiny on procurement waivers, DSG risk, and major contract exposures. Obviously, until performance is proven and sort of not assumed. So could I ask, could we add maybe and ensure a reoccurring slot maybe for these issues?
We've got to be very careful here that we don't stray into the territory of the Assets and Procurement Committee, whose job it is to do exactly that. Our job is to make sure that the overall system is in place to make sure that there is the oversight. And we do get the opportunity to do that when various parts of Mairead's reports are presented before us. I think we'd be in grave danger of duplicating the work of the Assets and Procurement Committee.
I take that noted. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, so no objections. We will accept the agenda plan. Item 8, which is, I'm pleased to say, the final item on today's agenda, is the committee training plan. And I just wonder, Mairead and officers, if consideration could be given, not for this to be put on the timetable yet, but to be put on the list of things which could be subject to training, the concept of assurance. And it's a quite complicated concept. We see it particularly when it comes to audit, of course, but it's much wider than that. And it's not always susceptible to numerical analysis, because I noted the comments which were made by Councillor Yanades about that. So it is a complicated process. It's one which isn't uniform as well. There are different types of assurance. And I think, if I may suggest it to officers, that it might be useful to put that on the list for a potential future item of training, so that it can be explained the different things which are meant by assurance. Are there any, if that's acceptable to officers? Yep. And are there any other items anyone wishes to mention about the training plan? Okay, then we will accept that. And that, I'm pleased to say, concludes today's business. Thank you very much indeed for your perseverance, members of the public, officers and members. I know it's been a lengthy meeting, but it's really been important that everyone's been able to have their say, particularly on the audited accounts, and also on the work which was being done on assurance from the Directorate. So thank you very much indeed. The next meeting is scheduled to take place on Thursday, the 26th of March at 2 p.m. And even though I haven't got a gavel, I declare this meeting closed. Thank you.